Tom Brake again mentioned Germany, and I really think the fifth largest economy in the world, i.e. ours, should really start talking about realistic numbers. And I will now throw down the gauntlet and say I would like the Liberal Democrats to propose 100,000 that we take. This is less than 1% of our population, and I'd like you to think about it in the context that we are living with annual net migration of 250,000 plus. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I call Paul Reynolds and ask Suzanne Fletcher to stand by?
Good morning, Conference, and happy Sunday morning. Thank you very much to Tom Brake for presenting this motion. I think it provides a reasonable framework, but I have some criticisms which I wish to air with you. First of all, it talks about humanitarian corridors, and this is very important. I mean, the United Nations stopped counting the dead in 2014. The SCPR is currently talking about 470,000 deaths, something like 400,000 civilians in that. This is a global catastrophe. But if we want humanitarian corridors, we have to do business with the different belligerents within the war, including Russia and to some extent the Sunnis in Iraq, which contribute to Daesh, and other parties, the Saudis and Turkey. That's very difficult for us to do if we are one of the belligerents participating in bombing, even in a minor way. My second criticism is it talks about a no-fly zone. Now, let's be honest about this. Who's got aeroplanes? The only people flying who are not our side are the Russians and Syrians. A no-fly zone to be enforced means we have to go to war with Russia and Syria, and that's unlikely and unrealistic and needs better thought, this type of motion. But finally, my criticism is that the motion doesn't mention the fact that we vote as a party. We voted for becoming one of the belligerents and bombing the country. And frankly, if you look at the bombing process as it has gone so far from the Western point of view, it looks like containment of Daesh, not defeat of Daesh. And Daesh have been running guns and money and people across the Turkish border for 4 or 5 years and running people through Iraq for 4 or 5 years. And the Russians have done more to degrade Daesh than we've done in all of those years. So we really ought to have a very hard look at this, and that's why I have some criticisms. I think, frankly, with benefit of hindsight, it would have been better, ladies and gentlemen, if we had not voted to become one of the belligerents and to be a participant in bombing in this mess in the first place. Thank you.
Can I call Susan Fletcher and ask Mahmoud Henry Rogers to stand by?
Good morning, Conference. Yesterday we had a fringe meeting with SLF and LD for SOS, and there we were shown a life jacket, fluorescent life jacket, that had been picked up on the shores of Lesbos. It was this big, the size for a toddler. But then we heard it was a fake. It only looked like a life jacket. But then we were shown a life jacket that big, the size for a baby. That was also false. We heard about there's a new industry in Turkey making disposable boats. And if they collapse inward, trapping the occupiers. What sort of pressures are there for parents to have to pay enormous sums of money to these traffickers and to risk their lives and the lives of their precious children because they see absolutely no other alternative? The winners, of course, are the people smugglers. And then there are the unaccompanied children, going in large numbers across Europe, and we've heard about the perils that they have there, how many disappear, and we don't know where they are. But there's only one way to stop that, and that's by creating safe and legal routes for the refugees, safe and legal routes for those that are trapped in Syria under the most terrible conditions, and they see no other way than to be able to flee. And I'm very proud that in September last year, our party has a motion detailing how we have those safe and legal routes, and we're the only political party to have a real policy stand on that. But what I'm going to ask you to do is, we've all heard, I hope, about Tim Farron's call for 3,000 unaccompanied children to be given refuge, to be able to come directly to the UK. As we've already heard, there are people that are willing and happy to take and look after those children. But it isn't just going to happen by us agreeing with Tim. We've got to get our MPs and other opinion makers to back that. And I'm asking you to go back and to lobby your own MP. Get not only people in your own party, but other people that care that you know to do that. The same goes for upping the number of refugees that this government say they will take directly from Syria in a safe and legal way. At present, Cameron says he will take 20,000. We say it should be 50,000. There is a refugee welcome commitment. Look on the Refugees Welcome website. You'll be able to get a copy of that commitment. Many of our MPs have already signed it. Those that haven't have promised me that they are going to sign it.
Could you bring your remarks to a close,
Yes, I will.
please?
So please go back and lobby your MPs to make sure that those commitments are signed, as well as voting for the motion. Thank you.
Could I call Mahmood Henry Rogers and ask Chris Adams to stand by?
Hello, Conference. I support almost all the really good things that have already been said. However, they bear little resemblance to the motion that is actually written before you. I oppose this motion because it fails to engage constructively with the ceasefire that's on the ground in Syria. It risks escalation into a major international conflict, and it represents a continuation of the neoconservative policies of regime change of the last 5 years. Western policies of arming rebels to destabilize governments have never created democracy in the world. Trying to create a liberal democracy through violent force is like trying to conduct delicate brain surgery with a pickaxe. It's the wrong instrument to use. The motion fails to even mention the words ceasefire. But the ceasefire has the potential to be a new beginning for Syria. There needs to be a peace process to create a federal and democratic Syria so that militias are able to give up their weapons and to be reintegrated into a new Syrian society. The motion says Britain should face down mischievous policies of certain states intervening in Syria for their own ends. But Britain is one of those states. But what are we going to do? Are we going to sanction ourselves? Britain needs to become a neutral arbitrator, not cheerleading for one side, as this motion does. Cheerleading for one side is not how we made peace in Northern Ireland, and it's not how peace is going to be made in Syria. The calls for no-fly zones and humanitarian corridors are euphemisms for threatening violence to force ourselves into the conflict. It would involve firing on Russian aircraft. Conference, did you vote for a like-for-like replacement of Trident? Because if you want to go to war with Russia, you better have. Many of you are in local government. Think of your campaign achievements: saving hospitals, improving standards in schools, building new social houses, filling in potholes. All of these would be significantly undermined by a nuclear war with Russia. In all seriousness, this is a poorly written motion. With the ceasefire, there's an opportunity for all sides to unite against extremism. This motion is not a peace motion, but a war motion, so I urge you to vote it down.
Could I call Chris Adams, who's a first-time speaker, and ask Shaz Sheehan to stand by?
Good morning, Conference. Although I've spoken at a Welsh Spring Conference before, I've never actually spoken at a federal conference before. But I couldn't resist putting a card in when I realised that the emergency motion was on Syria. I'm going to be speaking specifically to Conference Cause 5 on the refugees rather than the rest of the motion. I speak as someone who has spent years of postgraduate study writing a PhD thesis on the influence of one specific group of refugees, the original refugees who coined the term the Huguenots back in the 17th and 18th centuries. And I realized, as I was looking at the Syrian refugees and the kinds of people they're coming across, the remarkable similarities that exist between the two. So I thought I'd list a few. They were highly skilled, often educated. In the case of the Huguenots, they were artisans often. In the case of many of the Syrians, they are people who are university educated or being educated in university when they have come over. They also are a mass exodus, fleeing persecution or civil war. They're often from more privileged backgrounds. They're willing to risk their lives to be smuggled across in ways which, often most of them die, or many of them die. And funnily enough, Germany is welcoming them with open arms in the same way as they welcomed the Huguenots back in the 17th century, even paying for them to come because they realize just how positive a contribution they can make to a society. So what lessons can we learn from our history then? The early advent of the Industrial Revolution in Britain can likely be attributed partly to the Huguenots because of the skills that they brought across. They provided the innovation that was needed. They helped expand our mercantile empire by their network in the diaspora. They were so successful that they provided a quarter of the funds of the Bank of England when it was first set up. Without them, Britain would have been poorer and weaker. Yes, the first 30 to 40 years that they were in Britain, they effectively lived off benefits, off the royal bounty. But you look at the long-term impact, their contribution on a whole range of levels became invaluable. And there is no doubt that the historical argument would be that exactly the same would happen with the Syrian refugees. Now, Conference, I know a lot of people have raised concerns about the motion. My main concern is that we don't send the wrong message, both to the country and to those refugees. We are Liberal Democrats. We are instinctively welcoming. We instinctively support those who are in need. We fight for the rights of the people who don't have a voice. We are internationalists, while most of the country, unfortunately, gets caught up in fear-mongering about immigrants. I will be supporting the motion, but whatever we do, Conference, please, we must send that clear message that we welcome Syrian refugees and we will support them when they arrive. Thank you.
Can I call Shaz Sheehan and ask Jonathan Brown to stand by, please?
Good morning, Conference. I'd like to spend my 3 minutes talking about the people who get caught up in a war, who are often referred to as collateral damage. We see them on our TV screens or read about them in the papers and then forget about them by breakfast. But now, because the dam has finally burst, they are making their way to Europe, and we in Europe have to face up to the issue. This refugee crisis is the biggest movement of people since World War II. It needs big people with big thinking to get to grips with it, because make no bones about it, it will need to be tackled. A head-in-the-sand attitude will not make it go away. Politics is the art of the possible, but only when we have the leaders to make the possible happen. The only leader with the cojones to step up to the plate has been Angela Merkel. But she has been let down by other European leaders, not least our own Prime Minister, hiding behind the skirts of dysfunctional Dublin III regulations. Britain and France make much of the pull factors when it comes to the camps in Calais, but making conditions just that little bit more humane will be a magnet. What utter rubbish. As though people flee their lovely homes, their lives, their careers, with only what they can carry just to get the next phone upgrade. For many, it has meant trekking thousands of miles and risking a treacherous sea crossing organised by unscrupulous people smugglers, risking life and limb and that of their children, making that choice between the devil and the deep blue sea. Until their homelands return to some semblance of normality, we cannot expect people to return, but we need to deal with the humanitarian catastrophe facing us. Having visited Calais and Dunkirk, I know the conditions there are atrocious, desperately cold, dehumanizing, and demeaning. But poor though the conditions are, the camp had become home to many people. As of last week, the French authorities started the process of demolishing those homes. The containers and reception centres that asylum seekers were asked to go to are full, or in some cases, more dangerous than the camp. In Calais and Dunkirk, there are no processing centres, nowhere for people to go to be assessed whether they have a bona fide right to be allowed into Britain. The situation is so desperate that 12 men, including one 17-year-old, have gone on hunger strike since the 2nd of March. And they have sewn their lips together.
Would you bring your remarks to a close, please?
They hope against hope that their actions will force the world to listen. We need leadership, and we need it now. Thank you.
Could I call Jonathan Brown and ask Jack Bell to stand by, please?
Thank you. In 2013, I gave my first ever conference speech on the subject of Syria, and this is the best motion I've seen, the best thing I've heard the party say on Syria since then. We have missed so many opportunities to prevent things from getting so much worse in Syria. And although this motion is short and it misses a lot of details, it's on the right lines and it mentions a lot of the things which matter to Syrians. And that is something that has been overlooked over and over again, is the Syrian perspective on this. This is why I've recently set up the Liberal Democrats for Syrian Freedom, Peace and Reconstruction, to try and connect party members with Syrians and hear what Syrians are saying and thinking and doing. In particular, this motion recognises the civil nature of much of the opposition to the regime. From the beginning, and it continues today, there are opposition groups providing secular teaching to girls in Raqqa, the thousands of opposition councils which have been democratically elected, running basic services, some much better than others, across the territories liberated from the Assad regime. And now that we have a partial ceasefire, we see the people out on the streets protesting again. Wahid, 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 Ashab Suri Wahid. The Syrian people are united, are one. Romantic, yes, but we're going to need optimism if there's any chance of getting peace out of this current disaster. Since the ceasefires have started, there have already been over 400 violations of it by the Assad regime, and that includes attacks and denial of access for food to areas under siege. For too long, the West has talked about talks as an end in themselves rather than a means to bringing about an end. Russia and the Syrian regime prepared for these talks. Amnesty reported that Russia systematically bombed hospitals all across opposition-held areas. This was and created tens of thousands more refugees. This is the way Assad was preparing for talks. We haven't done anything for years to give talks a chance. We need to focus on the real concerns of Syrians, and that means putting the emphasis on civilian protection, in particular, protection from aerial attacks, protection from detention. There are probably hundreds of thousands of Syrians who have been detained by the regime. Probably tens of thousands of those have been killed inside Assad prisons. And it also means protecting Syrians from starvation and the deliberate campaigns of siege that the regime uses to fight its war. To give peace a chance, we must demonstrate to Syrians that they will be protected and that these talks, unlike previous ones, are not going to be cover to allow the regime to increase its oppression. If peace is going to work, then the ceasefires have to actually bring about peace to people right now. Support the motion. Thank you very much.
Could I call Jack Bell and ask Lindsay Northover to stand by, please?
Hello, conference. agree with this motion, but I do have a problem with line 6. The problem I have with it is that the bit when it says legitimate opposition, how do we know who the legitimate opposition is? How do we know that the opposition that the West is supporting aren't jihadis under a different name? And who's the West to decide who the legitimate opposition is? As for Russia, condemning them just because they support rebel groups that the West doesn't, aren't supporting the rebel groups that the West does, it isn't helpful to the situation at all. What we need to do is get the Russians, the Chinese, and the permanent members of the Security Council, which Britain is a part of, to meet with the Council of Europe and have a proper international solution to this problem. We don't want to return to the bad old days of the Cold War, when we're at loggerheads with Russia and make it over Syria, which will make the situation in both Syria and the rest of the world a lot worse. If we want a solution to the migrant crisis, we should sort out the problems which are causing it, which is a never-ending war in Syria, which has been going on for about 5 years now. And if the West is backing an opposition group for regime change, as the previous speaker said, it's only going to make things worse. Just look what happened in Iraq. Look what happened in Libya. There's plenty of examples where this has happened, which we do not want to happen to Syria as well. So rather than playing geopolitics with Russia and Iran, what we need to do is have a serious debate, a serious talk on how to bring the situation to an end and bring peace to Syria and Iraq, get the Middle East stable, and then we'll see far fewer refugees making the dangerous journey across into Europe. So support this motion as a whole, but have objections to line 6. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Can I call Baroness Northover, who will now summate for the motion?
Conference, we've had an excellent, if very short, debate on an issue of supreme importance to our region and the wider world. We have long said that we have a tinderbox in the Middle East, and how right we were. Not only do we have a civil war in Syria, we have regional powers fighting proxy wars and global powers weighing in. And Daesh is exploiting that chaos. The EU has voted that Daesh is committing genocide. We therefore have a duty to act. Daesh does not respect borders, whether Iraq or Syria, and a UN resolution called on countries to act in this extremely challenging situation. Catherine Bearder spoke at the rally of the EU being the most successful peace project in history, and she is right. And it is within that peaceful bloc that we should be working together with our allies to help address the dangers of the Syrian conflict and the terrible consequences for its people. As Shaz and others have said, it's not surprising that people are fleeing in terror. Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan are housing millions of refugees with the potential instability of that. And that's why in the coalition, we put £1 billion into supporting those refugees and those countries and helping to educate the next generation. About 10% of the refugees have sought refuge in Europe, and I pay tribute to Suzanne Fletcher for her amazing work to support the refugees. And to other speakers here, and of course to Tim. And Chris is right about what refugees can contribute. And I thank Jonathan Brown for his work too and his tribute.
It is therefore welcome that there has been something of a cessation of hostilities, which is mentioned in the motion. And indeed, we must redouble our efforts to seek progress at the talks in Geneva. And those talks must include women, left out before, as so often the case. And there are a number of extraordinarily brave women working across the divides. We need to investigate humanitarian corridors, and they're very, very challenging and very dangerous to create. But we need to investigate them to try to get aid in and people out. And we know that they can endanger those who use them unarmed. We need to investigate no-fly zones, something the UN negotiator has been pursuing. And it is with our EU allies that we must work to find a humanitarian answer to the refugee crisis. And that does mean accepting our share of the refugees, especially, as we've heard, unaccompanied children who are indeed so exceptionally vulnerable. And I fully agree with Jonathan Fryer, sustained plans for reconstruction are essential. So in this incredibly complex and desperate situation, I commend this motion to you and ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to a vote on the motion as printed. Could I see all those in favour of the motion? Are there any against? There are the odd votes against, but it is overwhelmingly passed. Thank you, Conference. Can I thank my aide, Liz Lynn, my hall aide, Mary Reid, and could I now hand over to Jeff Payne, Vice Chairman of the Federal Conference Committee.
Well, good morning, Conference, and welcome to this next item on the agenda, F20, electing diverse members of Parliament. You'll find the motion itself at page 55 of the Conference agenda. There are some amendments at page 4 of today's Conference Daily. You'll find that there are a couple of things that the Federal Conference Committee have drafted in. There are 2 substantive amendments that will be moved and voted on at the end of proceedings. I have had, as you would expect, a very, very large number of cards in this debate indeed. I'm going to call as many people as I possibly can, and it would help if speakers could keep to time, and I'm afraid I am going to be quite strict on the red light. If there are people sitting in the overflow area and want to vote, they'll need to come here into the auditorium. We're going to be having interventions in this debate at around 10:20. I have intervention cards already, and I'll be announcing who needs to go to the interventions in a little bit. Would Rebecca Thomas from Erewash please stand by to propose Amendment 1? And I now call Karen Lindsay from West Lothian, who is a member of the Federal Executive, to speak in favour of the motion. Karen.
Conference. Actor Will Smith said recently that diversity is America's superpower, going on to say that you need everyone's ideas in the gumbo. A parliament which fails to reflect the diversity and lived experience of the people it represents can't be truly legitimate. A party that puts a slate of candidates who don't reflect the people it aims to represent can't be fully credible. Diversity changes the political agenda. Look at what Joe, Lindsay, Jenny, Lynn did in government, and look at what Obama has done in the US. How much better, how much more liberal is a society in which everyone's voice is heard and heeded? Our job as Liberals is to make that happen, starting with our own party. Conference diversity can and should be a Liberal Democrat superpower, but it isn't. 84% of Liberal Democrat MPs ever elected have been male. We have had just 2 ethnic minority MPs in our history. Now let's be clear, that's the entire history of the Lib Dems, the Liberals and the SDP. That, I'm sure you will agree, is just not good enough. We need BAME, disabled candidates, candidates of every sexual orientation and gender identity. We should be leading the way, not trailing the Tories. Tim Farron has been clear. He wants to see half our candidates in target seats being women, 10% from BAME backgrounds, and disabled and LGBT plus candidates. Whilst this motion is supported by FE, it's the product of 3 or 4 different draft motions developed by different parts of the membership. Conference, this is an ambitious and comprehensive plan that will work. Let me tell you what we're proposing. All seats where we polled 15% or more will have to prove that they have tried hard to find applicants from underrepresented groups. If any of our MPs stands down, his replacement will come from an all-women shortlist. In regions where we have 2 or more seats where we have 25% of the vote, 1 will be required to have an all-women shortlist. A candidate diversity task force will work out how to get rid of the barriers that we know exist. Any local party will be able to reserve spaces on shortlists for people from underrepresented groups defined in the Equality Act as BAME, LGBT and disabled. This is a first for a UK party. There are lots of people who wish we could legally do more. I'm one of them. I want to see the party campaigning for the Equality Act to be extended to cover exclusive shortlists for all underrepresented groups. This is why we're happy to accept Amendment 2. It is this combination of measures that will ensure success. We need them all. We've been traditionally reluctant to adopt all-women shortlists, and I know that most opponents are as committed to equality and diversity as I am. Here's the thing, though. They work. The massive effort put into other methods has not worked. Look at Labour's success. 43% of their MPs are now women. Look at the one time we've managed to achieve a gender-balanced team of candidates in an election, when we used zipping in the 1999 Euros. Internationally, the British Parliament is 49th in the world in terms of its percentage of women MPs. And every other country, bar 2, that has better female representation has taken some form of positive discrimination. The Scottish Party has already gone much further than the provisions in this motion, with members voting for by a margin of 3-1 for measures such as ring-fenced funding to support candidates from underrepresented groups and ensuring that the candidates in our top 5 winnable seats will be women. Conference, I realise this is uncomfortable, but we have to recognise that the culture of this party can be a big barrier to equality. When you have young female members being told that women should wake up, recognise their biological duty and stop crying out for equality, when members tell me that actually it's fine to closely question women about their childcare plans if they're standing for Parliament, you can see we've got work to do. And this wasn't in the dark ages when I first joined the party. This was 2 weeks ago. We have to change this culture, and believe me, we will. But it won't happen overnight, and key seats need to start selecting within weeks. It's clear, Conference, the playing field is not level for men and women. It's even less level if you're a man of colour, even more so a woman of colour, or if you have a disability. We must sort this out. In 2001, Jo Swinson led the charge against supporting all-women shortlists. She then spent a decade and a half putting her heart and soul into encouraging, inspiring and mentoring people. She and others like Sal could not have done more, and it's right to acknowledge and appreciate their effort. Jo's changed her mind, though, because we've gone so far backwards. She told Scottish Conference, "We're now the outlier, the anomaly, the party that looks like we just don't get that the world has changed." Jo wasn't alone. Speaker after speaker said they'd been dead set against, but had now come round to the idea. Another feature of that debate was that a stream of young people from underrepresented groups saying that they would be more likely to put themselves forward for selection. We know that if we adopt these mechanisms, we will be able to achieve the targets set by our leader. Rejecting them would just embed the discrimination that already exists in our party. As Tim pointed out the other day, our constitution demands that we oppose all sorts of entrenched privilege and inequality. Using these methods is entirely consistent with our liberal values. Sometimes people treat the use of quotas and all-women shortlists and getting the best person for the job as if they are entirely different things. That is a false dichotomy and is not backed up by the evidence. This party is far from being a meritocracy. Think about it. If it were, we would have had far more than 19 women MPs out of 111. Recently, academic research busted many of the commonly held myths about all-women shortlists. They found that they resulted in a higher quality of candidates across the board who went on to perform well in Parliament. And those elected were diverse in other ways too. They conclude, quotas do not pose a threat to merit at any stage of the political process. The Liberal Democrats should be enthusiastically embracing the move towards all-women shortlists. If you vote to remove this from the motion, you will rip the heart out of it. Even the Canadian Liberals' approach only gets us so far. Justin Trudeau was rightly praised for appointing a 50-50 cabinet, but the overall makeup of their parliamentary party is not as good. Out of 150 new MPs, only 44 were women. But there's some benefits to that. Let me explain why. Back in 2005, a key seat in Scotland was selecting. I wouldn't let them, as candidates convener, proceed with an all-male list. They found a woman candidate when they re-advertised, and that was Alison McInnes, our fantastic justice spokesperson. The Scottish Party was stunned, however, when she was beaten to first place on the list for the coming elections by a white man. Conference, we need to think about the message we send by our vote today. Passing the motion will be a huge signal to people from all underrepresented groups that we welcome them, we want to include them, and we are committed to giving them a fair chance of getting into Parliament. You have to decide whether you want to bust through the glass ceiling or cement it in place. There is no middle route. Please support the motion and Amendment 2.
Thank you very much, Karen. Conference, I'm going to announce who the next few speakers are. The first is going to be Rebecca Thomas from Erewash, and will Glanville Williams from Colchester please stand by to move Amendment 2. After that, I'm going to call David Buxton from Epsom and Ewell, and after David, I'm going to call Gemma Ralston from Reigate. So would Gemma please go to the speakers table on my left? That would be great. In the meantime, with Glanville Williams, as I say, please stand by. And I now call Rebecca Thomas from Erewash to speak in favour and propose amendment number 1.
Good morning, Conference, and thank you to the Chair and aides. I'm a new member. I joined in May 2015. This is my first time speaking at Conference. Thank you. I really hope that's not all the applause I get today. I know this is a contentious issue, and I could have chosen an easier one for my first speaking at Conference, I know that. But here I am, I'm standing here, and I ask you to listen to me. Karen said some amazing things there. Diversity is a good thing, no one's going to deny that. I am the diversity champion for the East Midlands, and I am proud to be fighting for equality and diversity, but I do feel very strongly about all women shortlists. The emergency motion for the East Midlands was passed with 87% to stand against all women and all disabled shortlists. We submitted this amendment on behalf of the East Midlands region with 26 members' signatures at the beginning. More have tried to get in since then. But let me introduce myself. You might have noticed I'm a woman. I'm also disabled. I'm deaf in my left ear. I am the legal loophole in the Equalities Act, and that doesn't make me feel great, okay? Our Constitution says that we reject prejudice and discrimination on the basis of race, colour, age, disability, sex, and sexual orientation. Do we need to change our constitution? Because I feel like I'm being pigeonholed for my sex and my disability at this point. Thank you. If we accept all women shortlists, all disabled shortlists, all anything shortlists, then we are encouraging positive discrimination. You can call that positive action if you want, but we are pigeonholing people, we are categorising them, and that's not okay. A rose by any other name would stink in this instance. Speaking of discrimination, I've been trying to be a voice for new members, to be as supportive as I possibly can in my local community. And a new member came to me a few weeks ago and told me he was interested in this policy. He was interested, I'm saying he was interested in this, but he couldn't talk on it. And do you know why? He said, because I'm a man and I'm white. And that outraged me. Now, I know that we have far too many male MPs, and I know that we have far too many of the pale MPs, as we would like to call them. However, we don't want to silence people. We don't want to silence men who are white because they don't feel that this is their issue too. And of course, they should be able to speak. If we change those words to, I can't speak on this because I'm a female and I'm black, we would feel uproar, we would feel outrage. Conference, what we need to fight for is the empowerment of every person in this room and out of this room. I joined the Liberal Democrats because I'm a Liberal. I don't think this is. I was told by a supporter of this that I don't have to be a Liberal to vote for it. That worries me. I joined because I want to fight back for fundamental values of liberty, equality and community. We've tried it all before, but we are not the same people we were before. Look at the new members, the new hope and the new fight back that we have. I'm a disabled woman, and nobody shortlisted me to get onto this stage. I got here myself, and I encourage all of you to do it from the grassroots. The rest of the motion is fantastic. Please do support the amendment, and please...
Would you draw remarks to a close, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much indeed. Would David Buxton from Epsom and Ewell please stand by? And I now call Glanville Williams from Colchester, who's Vice Chair of EMLD, to move the second amendment.
Conference, I want to move the amendment 2 because for me it goes further than the alternatives in promoting equality of outcome for all. It does this through a commitment to monitoring, a commitment to lobbying for secondary legislation covering shortlists for the other strands, and a commitment to gender and also to disability shortlists. And it's also a commitment to being more creative about how we use the positive action tools that are already available to us, such as reserved places for minority candidates, and using best practice selection techniques such as banding and tie breaks. Ladies and gentlemen, talent, ability, competence, call it what you will. It is not unique to or the preserve of middle-aged white men. Ability does not discriminate. It touches whoever it pleases, men, women, black, brown, gay, and so on. Historical underrepresentation, therefore, within the party must be seen as a manifest failure in our selection processes and a manifest failure in our resolve as a party to apply our most basic and fundamental liberal ideals and principles. Principles of merit, principles of fairness, fair play, and a level playing field. Conference, underrepresentation occurs as a result of the interplay between two variables. Barriers which deter, dissuade, and discourage certain individuals from applying, and hidden bias which excludes these individuals from progressing. If we are to be truly representative of the communities we seek to serve, we need to go beyond the current fascination with shortlists and begin dismantling the barriers and removing the selection bias which in safe seats has over the years resulted in men being selected in preference to women, whites being selected in preference to ethnic minorities, and able-bodied candidates being selected in preference to candidates with disabilities. Conference, we must judge ourselves on outcomes, not on good intentions, not on diversity training, not on leadership programs, important that they all are, but on outcomes. Let's take the tool of banding as an example. Whilst there will always be outliers, candidates who are demonstrably head and shoulders above their rivals, and who should always be selected irrespective of their race or gender or disability status, the truth is that the choice of whom we select will more often than not be made from a small band of substantially qualified candidates, the yellow group. In this circumstance, a tie-break mechanism can be legitimately used to select a minority candidate over a majority candidate in order to address historical underrepresentation which has been carefully evidenced through proper monitoring. Now, this motion, in my humble submission, should represent a comma and not a full stop. We mustn't stop here. Indeed, Conference, we can't stop here. As a party, we have to continue writing this new chapter in our history, a chapter that embodies the best of our ideals. Conference, one of my earliest and fondest memories as a young boy in Ghana was sitting around a fire at night and listening to the village elders narrating parables that reinforce some of life's important lessons. Permit me, if I may, to narrate to you one such parable. I want you all to imagine that the human body was having its annual general meeting this morning, and all the various parts of the human body decided to congregate in the auditorium, not too dissimilar to this. And the meeting, as usual, was being chaired by the brain, and the topic of discussion was who is the most important part of the human body. Being the chair, the brain started off first and explained that because he was the brain, without him, the body would be, of course, brain dead and cease to function.
Sorry, Glam, I'm going to have to ask you to draw your remarks to a close.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, Conference, I'll quickly resume. I'll quickly finish. The bottom line is this, is that we are all important. We're all parts of the body, and we're all important to the success and the relevance and the viability of this party.
Thank you very much indeed, Glam. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would Gemma Ralston from Reigate please stand by? And I now call David Buxton from Epsom and Mule, who wishes to speak for the motion as a whole. David will give his speech in British Sign Language, and one of our BSL interpreters is going to interpret it for him. Yes, please go ahead, David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The Conference, the Conservative election victory appears to have delivered a heavy blow to long-term effects to ensure the greater representation of disabled people in Parliament. What the hell is happening in the 21st century democratic Britain? There are only 2 disabled MPs, just 0.5%, despite 19% of the UK population having a disability. Conference. Clearly, political parties have not done enough to identify and encourage potential disabled candidates. The Conservatives are shamefully well ahead of us. We were the party who took the lead on this in the 1990s and were recognised as the most inclusive of the main political parties. Yes, I am a deaf sign language user, but my disability has not stopped me. I was the chief executive of a national charity and previously senior management in public and charity sectors for 20 years. I have the experience, skills and ability that should be utilised by this party. I was twice elected borough councillor. Stood for Parliament twice and also Greater London Assembly. But when I tried for selection in one of the Liberal Democrats' target seats, I failed. But I won't quit. I am still Liberal, and I will strongly believe in our values of liberty, equality and community. I set up the Liberal Democrats' disability group in 1992 and recruited lots of new members. But where are they now? Where are they? We must get out there and change things. Change mindsets and attitudes, and turn this party into a more welcoming, inclusive, relevant and diverse party with a greater number of women, young people, BMAE, LGBT and disabled people. We must offer ourselves as diversity champions to train, listen and support local parties to change and recruit more candidates for the future. Not only local parties, but the National Party must also sell new ideas, new policies, and be more business-friendly and more disability-friendly. We have to show we mean business to embrace equality and diversity that will win new members, voters, and candidates who will be excited to stand for a Liberal Democrat Party full of pride and belief. You may not be aware, but Parliament has never had a deaf BSL user in its history. Let's make the Liberal Democrats the first party to make it happen. Yes, you can make it happen. Elect and see more diverse MPs. Please support the diversity motion. Let us be brave and bold and win back the voters with a more inclusive and diverse mandate. Let's hope I will see you in the Houses of Parliament
Thank you,
soon.
David. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, David. Would Chris Lucas from Bath and North East Somerset please stand by? And I now call Gemma Ralston from Reigate, who is Membership Secretary of the Liberal Democrat Disability Association, and she wishes to speak against the motion.
Oh boy, I didn't realise I was going to follow David. I am a woman, and I am a disabled person and a carer. So you'd think I would be for this motion, but no, I am not. No way, Jose. It seems to be window dressing, and without making sure the shop is good enough and working properly. Sal said that there was proper consultation with LDDA. No, there wasn't, Sal. We only saw it once or twice. Once when Kelly Marie assumed that everyone had seen it, but only 3 people had. The rest of the exec hadn't. Why? It was top down. It's poorly written. Only certain people were supposed to see it. Not everyone saw it. I'm glad the LDDA decided not to support this motion, because if it had, I would have had to vote against my own association. And I've been working damn hard for the last 15, 16 years to try and build this association up. And what it would have done? Nothing. Why should a person's gender or disability mean that they get a seat? I know one person who's got a disability in this party who thinks that the only reason he'll get a seat is because of his disability. I know one other woman who was a candidate at the last election, won't stand in a seat where there's all women shortlists. So that's 2 people we will have lost if this goes through. Yes, we are only allowed to have all women and all disabled shortlists. But there's other things that the Equality Act says we should do. And I don't we do them. Equality impact assessments, making sure our literature and our videos are accessible. Our decline over the last few years wasn't because of our diversity. It was because the electorate wanted to kick us and you know where and didn't like what we were doing in government. Please don't let this motion go through, because there's going to be a lot of us who are going to think of leaving this party. And we should be equal in this party, not feeling like we're second-class citizens.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Would Alex White from Galloway please stand by? And I now call Chris Lucas from Bath and North East Somerset Liberal Democrats, who wishes to speak for the motion as a whole.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a business studies lecturer at my local college, and any teacher will tell you that every day we have to fight a battle against the combined forces of Snapchat, Facebook, and Tinder for the attention of our students. So I try and be a little bit provocative. And I say, hello everybody, my name is Chris Lucas, and I'm a feminist. Now that doesn't fail to stimulate some kind of debate. And it allows me to open up the conversation to other things that I care very passionate about, such as equal pay, female representation on FTSE 100 boards, and family-friendly practices within businesses. But it also allows us the opportunity to talk about the other things that matter. Rampant sexism that exists in society, in business, and also in politics. Now, anyone who has ever stood in a selection will tell you that questions are asked of female candidates that are not asked of men. Questions are routinely asked about, does she have any children? Or what will happen to them if she gets elected? And also, what does her husband think? Conference, unconscious bias is real. It is real, and it is a clear and present danger to the future prospects of our party. In politics, as well as in business, we need diversity. Diversity brings creativity, it brings a much wider spectrum of views, and it also brings better decision-making. But in politics, it is perhaps even more important, because in politics, we're talking about public representation. We're talking about representing people who were constituencies within constituencies. Women make up more than 50% of society. So to have less than 50% of women MPs is a disgrace and should not be allowed to happen. All Women's Shortlist is not perfect, but it is a way that we can try to fix the problem. Illiberal? No. Democratic and representative. Sledgehammer to crack a nut? No. Well, yes, actually it is, if the nut is ignorance and prejudice. And what about the other characteristics? No, women are unique amongst the diversity strands because it requires more intensive intervention. Conference, please support this motion. And let's take a stand against ignorance and prejudice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Would Amy Stewart, that's Amy Stewart from Bristol, please stand by. And I now call Alex White from Galloway, who wishes to speak for Amendment 1.
It shouldn't surprise most of you that I agree with most of what Chris said. In fact, I agree with what a lot of people have said. There is a problem in this party with diversity. Look around you, guys. We're white, we're predominantly male, and we're predominantly middle class, and we're predominantly able-bodied. We do have a problem. No one is trying to deny that. I am not going to sit up here and pretend it's okay because I know it's not. I'm a young woman in the Lib Dems, and young women in the Lib Dems face a plethora of problems. I do not know a single woman in this party who has not been sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, or had inappropriate advances made against them, and that is disgusting. And I want that to change. I want there to be an actual substantial change, and I just don't think AWS is going to do that. I have a lot of respect for the women in this party who are promoting this, but I can't agree. It's a cosmetic change. It changes the outlook of our parliamentarians, but does nothing to face the problems in our membership and the problems in our party structure. We need to revolutionise how we treat women, how we treat people with disabilities, how we treat BME, how we treat people from low-income backgrounds. We need to change this, and there are other ways to do it. There is unconscious bias training, which the General Election Review put in place. And I'm really glad, but I would actually like to have seen Conference mandate the Federal Executive to put it forward. And trust me, if it doesn't go forward, I will be up here again and again and again to make sure that we see the substantial change we need. And we could have quotas. I want it to be able that a white middle-class man can be beaten by a BME woman from a low-income background. I want to see that happen. I have been in this party for 6 years in April. By the time I get to the age where I leave Liberal Youth, I would have been Liberal Youth for 14 years. And I know I'm old hat now. I want to see in that time a substantial change to this party. I want to make sure that the young women coming up beyond me are safe and confident and can succeed. Thank you very much, Conference. Please support Amendment 1.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Would Anne Cremin from Sutton Coldfield and Erdington please stand by? And I now call Amy Stewart from Bristol, who wishes to speak for various lines in the motion. Amy.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Conference. I hope you're all feeling a bit more awake and alive than I currently am. At Autumn Conference, I spoke in the opening rally as a new member. At the time, I said that was the scariest thing I'd ever done, but in hindsight, it was a pretty easy gig compared to this, because I was telling you all exactly what you wanted to hear. I told you the party was amazing, and the people are lovely, and you laughed and you clapped, and we were all lovely and happy together. But this party is not always a happy place to be a young woman, and certainly not an ambitious one. This is not a realization I made overnight, but a cumulative one made over my first 10 months as a member. It's one I made every time someone assumed I was just a hanger-on at an event. Every time a man twice my age sends me a message on Facebook, littered with kisses and winky faces, offering to show me the ropes of the party, or something more explicit. Every time someone puts their hands on my body in the queue to the conference bar, using the excuse of the last glass of wine or the excitement of Glee Club. And every time, I take a step back. When my picture is complimented more than my politics, I wonder if that is my place in the party. And when I look to our parliamentary representatives and 8 white, middle-aged, able-bodied men look back, I wonder if that is theirs. There is no shortage of amazing women in this party, but the problem of unconscious bias starts far, far before selection interviews. Training is incredibly powerful and a crucial part of increasing diversity, but its effects take many years and many elections to permeate through the party. Those are years that I and every woman and minority in this party simply should not have to wait. I hate the idea that we, the supposed party of evidence-based policy, might be swayed by one person's experience. And while I'm confident to assure you that my experience is in no way unique, I also encourage you to consider the evidence that we are presented with. Evidence that shows all women shortlists improve the quality of male candidates, while at the very least not diminishing that of female ones. And evidence in peer-reviewed studies that shows the introduction of these shortlists concurrently increases the number of BME candidates selected. Of the arguments against this motion, I find the one that this is illiberal to be perhaps the most frustrating. Let me be clear that there is nothing liberal about this party's status quo. By failing to have a truly representative parliamentary body, we harm our electoral chances and thereby the lives of the electorate. I know many people whose position on this topic has shifted from fervent objection to tentative support after watching a decade of their efforts to increase diversity reap little reward. When I come to conference in 10 years, I want to be surrounded by women and minorities who have had the opportunity to lead my generation, and I want to do the same. I therefore will be voting for this motion and against Amendment 1, and I implore you to do the same.
Thank you. Fine. Conference, in a few speeches' time, we're going to move to the interventions. Could I ask the following people, please, to go to the intervention microphone? Rosalind Gordon, Tim Price, Prue Bray, Mick Taylor, Amy Fortnum, Sue Doughty, Liz Leffman, Jane Dodds, and Daisy Cooper. Would Helen Belcher from Wokingham stand by? And I now call Anne Cremin from Sutton Coldfield and Erdington, who wishes to speak for Amendment 1.
Okay. Thank you very much, Conference. I'll admit to being very nervous, first-time speaker, a disabled woman who could have picked an easier motion to speak on, especially especially the morning after Glee Club. And I am very glad this motion exists. The party clearly does have a problem. But to me, it's not one which is seen first and foremost in the diversity statistics of our MPs or our councillors. It's a problem which we can see in the fact that before I went to my first conference, which was Bournemouth, I was warned by my friends to stay away from certain men, particularly high-up members of the party. It's seen in the fact that I'm not surprised that in a mate's term at Liberal Youth, half of the people on the exec were sexually assaulted. That when I'm discussing candidates with other Liberal Democrats, it's alarmingly frequent that I hear assertions like, he's quite good, he's reasonably good at this, but he's a little bit handsy. Crucially, we need to recognise that our shortlist cure does not at all treat these underlying attitudes towards women. What it does is it plasters over these issues, helps us hide from our real problems, allows politicians to pat themselves on the back, feel a bit better about themselves, defend themselves to Andrew Marr. But really, all these all-women shortlists are actually going to do are promote women who actually are quite like me. I'm a bit boring, I'm white, I'm actually relatively privileged, I've got a great education. This motion might help force one or two people like me up, but it does so at a price of hurting our self-esteem, allowing people like me to believe that I am a token woman. And I've been elected to positions because I've been a woman, and it's not pleasant. It also allows men, or people less generous to women, to disabled people, to say they got this position because of where they've come from, because of their biology. So I can understand how desperately you want to see people pushed up, how desperately you want to see the membership of the party reflected in the MPs, in the councillors, in the representatives, and it would be very nice to look better than the Tories, look better than Labour. But in reality, all women shortlists, all disabled shortlists are going to do is hide the underlying culture, help us run away from the problem, and not help us address it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would Tim Farron from Westmoreland and Lonsdale please stand by? And I now call Helen Belcher from Wokingham, who wishes to speak for the motion as a whole and for Amendment 2 and against Amendment 1.
Conference, let me start by declaring an interest in this debate. I'm a woman, one of that minority of 51% of the population. I've also just started the process of seeing if you want me as a parliamentary candidate. Who knows, this speech could bring that process to a swift conclusion. I support the motion and Amendment 2. Something that some of you may not have twigged is that for the first 40 years of my life, I lived as male. Transitioning to female reinforced what I had already learned, that men had a lot of power and social status, and most don't realise it. I started a software company just before I transitioned in 2004. As a woman, I have to work a lot harder just to be listened to be taken seriously, than when I was perceived as a man. I had experience of doing software demonstrations and training for many years before 2004, so I can make that first-hand comparison. Doing presentations over the last 10 years with my male sales director, you can see men wonder why I'm there, because surely I, a woman, couldn't have the required technical knowledge, and clearly I'm not there for my looks. The fact that I had designed and written the software simply seems beyond their initial comprehension. And yet, my male sales director simply hadn't twigged this until I pointed this out to him, and now he sees it everywhere. Men are simply unaware of the status and privilege they have. Bless. Having been in politics for just 10 months, it feels similar. While we as Liberal Democrats support the idea of equality, it can be hard for the men amongst us to grasp what that truly means. Lack of equality means lack of representation where it matters. Let me give you an example. How many out trans MPs are there? How many have there ever been? The answer, my friends, is a big, fat zero. While Parliament has just woken up to some of the issues that trans people face, and the Commons has just had an inquiry where they talked to a few trans people, including me, we rely on allies to raise issues. While we have some great allies in the Lords, like Baronesses Barker and Featherstone, and while we had some great allies in the Commons, like Julian Huppert, we currently can't force parliamentarians to look a trans person in the eye in either chamber to explain exactly why we should have to continue to suffer discrimination in schools, in wider society, continue to receive poor and often delayed health care, and be locked up in the wrong prisons should we do something wrong. Conference, please support the motion.
Thank you very
much. Reject Amendment 1.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen. Conference, after the next speech, we're going to move to the interventions. So would the interveners stand by? The first intervener is going to be Rosalind Gordon. I now call Tim Farron, who's Member of Parliament for Westmoreland and Lonsdale. I have a card from you, Tim. It's the first time that's ever happened to me. I have a card that says Tim Farron MP, Westmoreland and Lonsdale, party leader, speak in favour of the motion. So,
yeah, all right. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Look, actually, it's not the first time I've been at conference on the last morning of conference and missed being called. Normally, however, it's because I'd had a long night the night before, and these days I have to behave myself. Now, I remember being sat somewhere up there at the back of the hall in Bournemouth, 2001, after one such heavy night. I didn't speak during the debate, but I listened intently to the debate on diversity at that conference in September 2001. I listened to all of it, and I was persuaded by a massively impressive speech by a young woman called Jo Swinson. She said she was not a token woman. She said that all selections should always be open and that positive action was illiberal. Today, Jo has changed her mind and I have changed mine. Why? Why? Because of the evidence. Yesterday, this conference passed a change in its policy on cannabis law because of the evidence, because that is what Liberals do. And the evidence is clear. An all-male, all-white parliamentary party, even at our best, with 9 women MPs out of 63, we were the least diverse of all the parties, and in our 150-year history, 2 non-white MPs. That is why I ask you to back this suite of measures today so that this Liberal Party that champions diversity like no other can put its house in order and walk the walk and look like the country we seek to represent. In 2001, I was one of those persuaded by powerful arguments, but I look back and I am sad to confess that they now feel like powerful excuses. Since 2001, we've tried a number of measures, and positive though they all are, they have not worked. All of my predecessors, with my full backing, tried subtle action with the best of intentions, and it has all failed so far. If we want to change, if we want to make a difference, then we need to be bold and do something different. As leader, I want to be able to reach out to every part of Britain with the confidence and credibility that my party represents every part of Britain. As leader, I want to effect the culture change from the top down and the grassroots up. As leader, it is important to me that this motion is passed now, at the beginning of the Parliament, so that we can crack on with winning elections, selecting candidates without delay, because we will not get a single woman elected to Parliament if we don't actually win some seats. I ask you, please don't let us be sat at conference in 15 years' time making excuses again for having failed to be the diverse movement we claimed to be. I stand before you as one who was persuaded by excuses in the past, but the time for excuses is past. This is our moment to make the crucial difference. Please grab it. Back the motion.
Thank you, Tim. Conference, our first speaker after the interventions will be Louise Candler from Harrow Borough, so would she please stand by. We're now going to move to a series of interventions, 1-minute contributions from the microphone over to my right, your left, the first of which is going to be Rosalind Gordon.
My first party conference, I attended the Not a Token Woman debate. As a 27-year-old confident woman, I thought, you haven't done enough because you haven't asked me. Since then, during at least 8 years as Vice Chair and Chair of Campaign for Gender Balance and Liberal Democrat Women, I have strode and led people like Jo Swinson to improve our representation in our party. I am still against all women's shortlists, yet I support this motion. Why? Because of the maths. Let's be honest, at the next general election, the number of winnable seats will be drastically reduced. We will only have 10, possibly 20 seats to choose from. There will be a surplus of excellent candidates, including former MPs, all vying for them. We must ensure that our representatives represent our society. We need to leave it to no chance, and the only way we can do that is by guaranteeing seats for women and other diverse representations. So therefore, please support this motion and the amendment.
Thank you. Let me add that the second speaker after the interventions is going to be Sal Brinton, so will she stand by as well as Louise Candler, please. Tim Price from Warrington.
Okay, broadly in favour of this motion, but it needs to promote diversity among all parts of the party, from very top Westminster all the way down to the local parties, and trying to promote everyone from any kind of background to come forward. I've been inspired by a number of people in the party who've got a disability, or just so happens to have a disability, doing great things in the party, and they need to be given a little nudge and can start flying. Including Sal Brinton, our great president. We need to encourage more people to stand for public office, and maybe a way of doing that is maybe to make some adjustments to the process, maybe make the application process a bit more accessible and open, and when it comes to the hustings, maybe allow extra time for...
Thank you. Our next intervener is Prue Bray from Wokingham.
Conference a few years ago, in a misguided attempt to get over the problems that women face in this party, remembering we are 50% of the population and not a minority, we introduced a rule that said that every shortlist was supposed to include a woman, because we didn't want all women shortlists. And what we ended up with was women sick and tired of being phoned up by local...
Thank you. Yes, the lights weren't reset. Prue, could you have you can have an extra 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. Women who are sick and tired of being rung up by local parties for seats they had no interest in and which had no interest in them, just to make up the numbers. That was tokenism. This is not tokenism. This is a way of actually getting women into the forefront of our party. We've tried a lot of things. We need to keep trying. All women shortlist is not the complete answer. It's a step on the way, and it's a step we need to take now, because we need to give ourselves that shove into positive action that will make the difference and make the cultural change that we need.
Thank you very much. Our next intervener is Nick Taylor from Calderdale.
I've been a member of this party for 51 years. For the first 23 years, we had no women MPs at all, and all male shortlists were the order of the day. Since then, I've heard this debate again and again and again, and we're still in the same position. We've tried everything apart from restricted shortlists to make sure women and minorities get representation. It hasn't worked. We did have zipping in 1999. It worked. We got a balanced parliamentary team in Europe. What did we do? We abandoned it, and women got replaced by men. We must have a real mechanism, and this is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Fortnum from Solihull and Meriden.
My fellow Liberal Democrats, equality and fairness are the proud foundations of this party. When others are satisfied with the rule of the majority, we stand up for the individual. For too long, Parliament has been synonymous with white, middle-aged men, and this requires urgent change. Indeed, if we are truly to follow in Canada's footsteps, we must strive for a 50-50 gender split. This shouldn't be news. worthy when 98 years ago women got the vote. When Justin Trudeau was asked why gender balance is important, he replied, "It's 2015. It is now 2016, and the fight back has been taking place for several months, but there is still a shocking lack of women in political positions. My mind has been changed, and this is an urgent issue. Previous Liberal ways of support and extra money are good, but they are not enough. Do we have a lack of diversity? Yes. Is this a problem? Absolutely. Please join me in supporting this motion. Thank you."
Thank you. Sue Doughty from Guildford, please.
Thank you. In 2001, 3 women MPs were elected, all of us in our 50s, and we faced endless discrimination being passed over for jobs for which we had the talent, the ability, in favour of men. There are a lot of older women as well available to be selected if we reinvigorate them, re-encourage them, get those women who've been facing that glass ceiling for 10 and 20 years of discrimination. We've got loads of fabulous younger women, and I really want to see them coming through, please. But don't forget that there are people who have tried, been knocked back, and we need to be reaching out for them. And one final thing, as a returning officer, if anybody tries to give me a biased, unconsciously biased reasons and questions, they will be straight out on their ear.
Thank you, Sue. Liz Leffman from Whitney, please.
Conference, when we were in government, Vince Cable did a remarkable thing. He told FTSE 100 businesses that they must include women on their boards. And now 25% of boards have women on them. Do we hear protests? No, we do not, because it was the right thing to do. We changed the country, we changed the face of business. That filtered down into FTSE 250 companies. Now it's time to do the same thing for this party. We cannot dictate to business or anybody else that they must change the way that they do things without changing things for us. We need women in government. This motion does it. Support the motion.
Thank you, Liz. Jane Dodds from Montgomeryshire, please.
Good morning, Conference. I come from Wales, where we have 40% of our Assembly members are women, but it's still not good enough. We need to strive for more. Look at countries like Rwanda. 63% of their parliamentarians are women. Bolivia and Cuba. South Africa, where they've just passed legislation for 50% of their parliament to be women. That's where we need to be. We need to be bold. We need to be audacious. We need to dream. This is what this is about. Let's look to the future. Support this motion. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Jane. And our final intervener is Daisy Cooper from Lewis.
If any local party or region came forward and said they didn't want to have all women shortlists because they had already achieved gender balance and broader diversity, I would down tools now and come out canvassing within an hour. But we're not there. This is a measure of last resort, and we have to use it. To those women who say, I don't want to be a token woman, and I don't want to be patronised, neither do I. Neither do I. But that is precisely how I feel under the current arrangements. We patronise our women and minority candidates every time we offer them resilience training so they can face down entrenched discrimination and unconscious bias. We patronise our women and minority candidates when we give them managing stress training so that to deal with the frustration of being asked unacceptable questions about where they really came from or the state of their womb. We patronise women and minority candidates when 6 months before a general election we scrabble around.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm afraid they cut the mics in a minute. Would Sal Brinton from Watford please stand by? And I now call Louise Candler from Harrow Borough, who's South Central Chair of Liberal Youth, and to speak for Amendment number 1.
Thank you, Conference. I'm a disabled woman, and this is my first time speaking at Conference. And I want to talk about something that's really important to me, which is mental health. This is something that's really hard to say in front of so many people, but I have mental health issues, and our dedication to mental health is one of the reasons that I joined the party. But the possible health implications of passing all women's shortlists or all disability shortlists have been very much overlooked in this debate. There's strong evidence linking positive discrimination to something called imposter syndrome, which you may have heard of. It's when someone who is high achieving cannot perceive their own merits and are convinced that they are tricking people, and it's extremely damaging. And it disproportionately affects women in particular, as obviously we already have lower self-esteem than men, as has been pointed out by Tim Farron. And it will make women and disabled people feel like they have only been elected based on their gender or their disability, and it won't change things within the party. And I myself have suffered from imposter syndrome, which obviously didn't help all my other stuff, and it's so isolating. You feel like you can't talk to anyone, you can't tell anyone, because you have to make sure no one finds out that you're tricking people into thinking that you're something that you're not. And so I'm strongly in favour of Amendment 1 to remove the all diversity shortlists. And the slogan, equality, not excuses, is very apt, because all women shortlists and all disabled shortlists, they won't achieve equality. It's just an excuse. We need to deal with the underlying problems, and I urge you to vote in favour of the amendments.
Thank you very much indeed, Louise. Would Liz Lynn from Mid Worcestershire please stand by? I now call Sal Brinton from Watford, who wishes to speak for the motion as a whole and against Amendment 1.
40 years ago, I was a young Liberal who felt as strongly as Rebecca, who moved Amendment 1. We didn't need measures for token women, because after all, that's illiberal. It's not the Liberal way. But is it illiberal? John Stuart Mill was always clear that there are times when interventions are necessary to get fairness and equity. Is there anyone in this room who disagreed with pupil premium? That was positive action for a specific group. And John Maynard Keynes said, "When the facts change, I change my views." Well, the facts have changed. We have 8 great but straight, white and able-bodied MPs. And I'm afraid we have to have action. Do you know there's now really good academic evidence and research that explodes the myths about all-women shortlists? Here's 3. Firstly, they produce token women who just aren't as good. Not true. Research has shown they produce women candidates who have more experience, have stood more times, and with more qualifications than their male counterparts. Secondly, AWS MPs are not as good MPs. They got there the easy way. Not true. They ask more questions, speak in more debates, and are generally more involved than the average MP, and many have also been promoted. Thirdly, all women shortlists favour the elite, middle-class white women. Not true. Labour's experience is that their AWS MPs have more ethnic minority candidates than the average, and MPs. Fewer went to Oxbridge, if university at all. But this motion is not just about women. How can we be a liberal party if our MPs don't look like the country we want to represent? The proposals for disabled, BME, LGBT candidates are just as important. Now, in the leadership programme, we were the first party to make some support and mentoring provisions specifically for these groups. And if you pass the motion today, we will be the first party to reserve formal places for them on shortlists for our top seats. 100 years ago, my cousin Mary was a suffragist fighting for votes for women. And my generation thought we could do it on our own. And so did Jo Swinson's. Now, next month, I'm going to become the grandmother to 2 identical twin girls. We're told that it's going to take 90 years to get parity in the House of Commons. My grandchildren will be coming to the end of their lives before we get parity. Do something now. Support the motion, reject Amendment 1.
Thank you, Sal. Conference would Katie Gordon, that's Katie Gordon from Glasgow South, stand by. And I now call Liz Lynn from Mid Worcestershire, who wishes to speak for Amendment number 1.
I passionately believe that we have to have a diverse parliament. And I also passionately believe in anti-discrimination. Lines 2 to 5 of this motion reiterate our commitment to eliminate all prejudice and discrimination. But positive discrimination is discrimination, however well-meaning. If we are positively discriminating in favour of one group, we are inevitably discriminating against another. If we have all women shortlists, we prevent perfectly good candidates from standing just because they don't fit the criteria that we want. So gay men, disabled men, men from ethnic minorities, men from poorer backgrounds, all men need not apply. They have to move if they want to get elected. That is discrimination. Are we really saying in this motion that Liberal Democrats and local parties refuse to select someone as a candidate because they are female or from another underrepresented group? If we are, that is scandalous and has to be addressed at the local level. I personally haven't found that to be the case. Many people didn't think I stood a hope in hell as a woman of being selected for a North West seat before I became MP. They were wrong, and I was selected under an open system. Some time after losing my seat in 1997, I decided I wanted to stand for the European elections. The obvious choice, of course, was the North West. I had represented it, and my house was there. I was told that because of zipping, under no circumstances would I stand a chance of getting elected because it was going to be a male-led seat, and I would have to move if I wanted to get elected. I was also asked by the candidate's office if I would apply for all the female-led seats, even though by this time I wanted the West Midlands, because not enough women had put their names forward in order to make it a reasonable contest. I believe a shortage of women willing to move would also be the problem with all women shortlists. Are people also saying that the women who were elected to the European Parliament would not have become MEPs on our own merit? If you are, which appears to be the case, I find that patronising, to say the least. In the last election, our problem wasn't that we didn't have enough good women as candidates in winnable seats, because we did. Our problem was that we had a disastrous result, and that was nothing to do with the calibre or the gender of the candidates. Discrimination is against our Constitution. Support Amendment 1.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. Would Sarah Brown, please, from Cambridge, stand by? I now call Katie Gordon from Glasgow South. Before Katie speaks, I ought to let you know I've received a request for a reference back, which I'm going to take a little bit later after a couple of speeches. Katie's from Glasgow South, as I say, and she wishes to speak for various lines in the motion.
So, Conference, I've spent the last 4 years as a campaigns and candidates convener for Scotland, and also as the convener of Scottish Lib Dem Women, leading the drive to try and talent spot, support, encourage, train, motivate, get selected and elected many women in Scotland, and have been proud to do that with our party leader, Willie Rennie. In that time, we've always had this rule of 40% women on any shortlist in a winnable seat. The difference was I enforced it in every single case, and the pelters I would get from local parties saying, oh, for heaven's sake, oh, can't we just keep this going? Oh, you're wasting time. It was complete, it was really quite bad.
Some parties would get on board, some local parties wouldn't. But the resistance was quite amazing, and even amongst held seats that was the case. So, and all I was doing was saying, I want you to find women so that next time, maybe they won't beat you this time, but maybe next time we'll get more people, more women who want to stand. The difference was that was always after the event. What I love about this motion is the specific thing about requiring local parties before they start selection to actually demonstrate what they've done to go out and find new underrepresented group candidates. I think that's a crucial part of this motion. It requires local parties to be upfront, and it requires everyone to be clear at the start of what they need to do. So nobody can say, oh, I didn't realise it's too late, oh, for heaven's sake. In 2011 in Scotland, we lost so many Scottish MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, and it was really sad, but it did give us that opportunity to actually say, okay, we don't have lots of incumbents. These 4 years driving that, and now I am the only woman standing at the top of a regional list, and probably the only woman likely to get elected to the Scottish Parliament. And it's a disgrace that we've spent all this time and we're still in that position. Now, people could say, token woman, this, that, and the other. To be honest, I do not care if you think I'm a token woman, because I know that I have beaten good men to get where I am, and I would have the same confidence if I were... I would have the same confidence whether it was all women shortlist or not. I know I'm good enough, but I want to see that path for more women to come up behind me so that they're not feeling like that. It is time for a specific radical step. This is for one election period only. So we need to stop being embarrassed when we're talking to other parties that we don't even meet up with what the Tories are doing. I remember Tim saying 2 years ago he was so beyond tokenism. Well, so am I. I think the important thing is the current situation is harming our party beyond belief. Willie Rennie led from the front, as Tim has done here. 2 weeks ago, we passed an even more radical motion. Please pass this motion today and reject Amendment 1.
Thank you very much. Conference, I'm going to deal with the reference back now. I'm going to read, and if, depending on what that happens, I'll call Sarah Brown or not. The way the reference back works, I can take it at any stage of the debate, and I'm going to take it now, is I'm going to read the statement of reasons that have been submitted to you. I'm then going to take a vote from conference members as to whether they want to hear a mini debate on the reference back. If you vote by a simple majority to do so, then we will have 2-minute speeches from the person who's moved the reference back and from a nominee on behalf of the movers, and then I will take a vote, and it's a simple majority to refer the motion back. Let me read the statement of reasons to you. It's a reference back to the federal executive, and it reads as follows. Does ticking a binary, legally assigned gender box sit alongside policies supporting self-determination and LGBT+ rights? Does imposing diversity measures sit alongside localism based on trusting people to make good choices on issues affecting them? Positive discrimination can, as an unintended consequence, exclude good candidates, reinforce biased thinking, and disenfranchise members. We do need positive action on candidate equity, but we have a responsibility to ensure we don't disadvantage other individuals or the party. It's from Chris Castle. I'm now going to take a vote on whether you want to hear a mini debate on the reference back, which is to the federal executive. Can I see all those who do please want to hear a debate on that? Can I see all those who don't? That clearly falls. That reference back goes. Bettina Lashmore from Hackney, please stand by. I now call Sarah Brown from Cambridge, who wishes to speak for Amendment 1. Sarah, I'm sorry for delaying you.
Morning, Conference. In days of yore, it said coal miners took caged canaries down mines to test the air. Imagine, if you will, one mine has a problem. 9 miners take down a canary, and after looking distressed for a bit, it dies. The miners realise they have a problem. Better get another canary, says one. So they do, and that canary dies, as does the 3rd and the 4th. Well, word gets round the local canary flock, and when they see the miners coming, they make themselves scarce. Now the miners really have a problem. I know, says one of them, for every 5 of us who go down, we'll reserve another 5 spaces for canaries, and we'll fill them from all canary shortlists. Slowly, the miners all get unpleasant health problems because the canary targets don't clean up the toxic air. I served 4 years as a councillor, and at the end of my term, I feel like I discovered a dirty little secret. I ended my term on antidepressants, and so it seems did a statistically implausible number of my colleagues in all parties. Some of us ended up comparing notes, citalopram or mirtazapine, which has worse side effects, that kind of thing. How messed up is that? Maybe we need a spent canaries support group. Studies show that men often overestimate or overstate their abilities, and women underestimate and understate them. This is reflected in how different genders respond to toxic environments, be it investment banking or be it politics. We ask a lot of our candidates, organise deliveries, run campaigns, spend X nights a week knocking on Y 100 doors, and so on. Our local parties often ask for more time than is reasonable. Men will quite often sign up and then just not do it all. Women, who tend to have a lot less free time to start with, will look at the expected workload and become stressed. I'm no expert in why this response is gendered, but it is. And we in all parties have built an environment that unconsciously selects men by tailoring that environment towards male typical responses to stress. That's a bad thing for men too, by the way. They just respond differently to it. The problem is not the women. The problem is with the toxicity of the environment. If we learned anything from New Labour's love of targets and quotas, it's that they provide simple solutions to the wrong problem. Don't get more canaries. Fix the toxicity. Please support Amendment 1.
Thank you very much. Conference, after the next speech, we're going to move to the summations. Would Adam Wayne please stand by to summate on the First Amendment? And I now call Tina Lashmore from Hackney to speak in favour of Amendment 2.
Thank you. Morning, Conference. What a fascinating image that I've got in my mind there from the previous speaker. So I'm not quite sure if I'm a canary now. But anyway, I'm going to go for it. Everyone's done a fantastic job in talking about methodology and statistics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put some bones on it. I'm going to try and put a human, female, black woman bones onto the discussion. When I was growing up and I looked in the mirror, I didn't see what you see. I saw white males. And that's fine, because that was the environment that I lived in. And as I matured, I started to have dreams, aspirations, traveling Europe, traveling America. I looked in the mirror, and I still didn't see me. Because the world around me, the airports, they were predominantly white male. And there's not a problem with that. That's just the way life was. And now, at 50, I come into the Liberal Democrat Party, and you're all beautiful. But no one really looks like me. And as much as I'd like to concur with my fellow citizen from Hackney, I've got to say, your Mohican doesn't fly like mine. So back to my point, which is, this isn't a motion which is a discipline to us. This is a motion about hope and aspiration for the next generation to come through. When we look at our children, those of you who have them, and grandchildren, you want them to look in the mirror and see themselves for the skills and abilities that they have, and you want them to look around the world and see that they've got a place in there. I instinctively feel that I have a home in the Liberal Democrat Party. And most of you have made me welcome, and I'm pleased to say I don't have the experience of many of our young women, and most of you have made me feel welcome. So make yourselves feel welcome. Embrace diversity and take all of us forward to the next generation and support Amendment 2 and the motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Conference, there were no speeches at all. There were no speeches at all against Amendment 2, so I'm not going to have a summation on Amendment 2. What I'm going to do is ask Chris White to stand by to summate on the main motion, and I now call Adam Wayne from Erewash to summate on Amendment 1.
Good morning, Liberal Democrats. As a new member, I guess I could have chosen a less high-profile opportunity to make my first contribution to a conference debate. But here goes. The first thing I feel I have to say is that I consider myself to have non-binary gender. I've only told this to one person before, and it shouldn't matter to you all. But the sad thing is that for this debate, it matters a great deal. Diversity is a good thing. No one here, well, I can't imagine anyone here will be arguing that diversity is not a good thing. It's an essential thing that we have to promote within our party. We need to empower, motivate, and support individuals to step forward. This amendment is not about diversity itself, it's about the means we use to attain that diversity. We've obviously had a lot of contributions to the debate, and it would be quite hard in my time to actually sum up everything that everyone said. But there are a few things that I feel just need sort of reiterating. Sorry, Tim, I have to object to your assertion that standing up against discrimination is an excuse. Positive action is not the same as positive discrimination. Discrimination is discrimination, and it is something we should be fighting for. There was an assertion that this is for one parliamentary period only. I think that probably the Labour Party said that when they introduced them as well, but they're still doing it. I think most of the people who have been speaking, I would agree 95% with what they said. It's just the all-women shortlists, or disabled shortlists, that I object to. I've been a passionate Liberal all my life, voted Liberal Democrat all my life, and I joined the party in May because I felt compelled to do something about the fact that we've been so roundly defeated in the election. At the very first event I went to as a new member, I met Barbara Pearce, the wonderful woman who is now Chair of Nottingham, and she showed me the preamble to the Constitution. At that point, I knew I was in the right party. It's a document of which we can be justly proud, and it stands at the core of who we are as Liberal Democrats. It rightly contains the following words: we reject all prejudice and discrimination based upon race, colour, religion, age, disability, sex, or sexual orientation. Yet this motion seeks to actively use discrimination in the form of all-women shortlists and all-disabled shortlists in order to further diversity. This is discrimination. However well-meaning the goal, it is still discrimination, and it's illiberal. We reject all prejudice and discrimination. It doesn't carry on in brackets unless it suits us. It's not relative. This is an absolute principle on which we hold ourselves accountable. Liberal Democrats, I urge you to uphold the values laid down in our Constitution, your Liberal values, and vote for Amendment 1. And when you pass Amendment 1, vote for the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Conference, our final speaker is Chris White from St Albans, who wishes to summate on the motion as a whole.
Conference, my name is Chris. I am a white, middle-aged, straight man from a public school who went to Oxford. I am obviously the right person to do the summation, and I'm obviously the right person to be a parliamentary candidate. Now, let's look at some of the arguments we've seen, both in this debate and online and in the bar. I have heard. The replacement problem. If MP X stands down before 2020, it would mean that the obvious person would not be selected. Guess the nature of that obvious person. As council group leader in St Albans, I'm the obvious person to stand for Westminster in St Albans, but actually I have the modesty, I think, to accept that the right person might be a woman or someone who addresses the audience using British Sign Language. Or a BAME candidate, or someone who is LGBT+, any of these could be a better fit than me. And then there's a wonderful one. I saw this in Lib Dem Voice. This was written by a former MP, actually. It said, in the 2001-2005 elections, about 23% of the approved candidates list was female, and about the same percentage of PPC selected was female. So no bias is evident there. Now, if 23% of the population were female, that wouldn't be a problem. But funnily enough, women are in the majority. And these figures really show the degree to which women are being knocked back by the selection processes of this party. And then we've had some of the ones that Sal's gone through. AWS favours white, middle-class Oxbridge women. That isn't the case. In fact, AWS shortlists are more diverse. It creates tokenism. We've heard a lot about that one. No, women on an all-women shortlist will need to be approved and then selected for the shortlist just like anyone else would have been. No tokenism there. And then there are other remedies. We could do more training of men. Now, unconscious bias, I think we all accept, or fairly conscious bias, some of the descriptions we've seen, is a serious problem in this party. From the what will your husband do about the children to a local party quiz night where there were huge numbers of questions about men, sportsmen, political men, men who wrote things, men who composed things. In fact, there were more questions about animals than there were about women. So what you should do is you send out some flyers saying there's some unconscious bias training at the next regional conference, and a man will pick that up and say, actually, yes, I'm a bit sexist. I'm going to go along to that. And you know, if a handful who did go along, went along, in 90 minutes would they learn to be unsexist after decades of being patronising? I doubt it. Or we could do more training of women or of minorities, as we have done for the last 15 years. We could do resilience training, coping with disappointment training, assertiveness training, jacket colour training. I tell you this, that sort of training is a heck of a lot more patronising than an all-woman shortlist. And then, of course, the big argument that we've seen with Amendment 1. It's not liberal. Now, Tim told us at the rally, we don't rely on laissez-faire to do our economics, so why should we rely upon laissez-faire to do our candidate selection? Now, and if Tim isn't good enough for you, then there's Sir Isaiah Berlin, a man from the 20th century, the greatest liberal philosopher of that century. Negative liberty is the absence of obstacles, barriers, or constraints, and positive liberty is the possibility of acting in such a way as to take control of one's life and realize one's fundamental purposes. The fundamental purpose of a female member of this party, of a BAME member of this party, of anyone who is LGBT+, anyone who has a disability, is to fight for Liberal Democrat values at any level, Council, Westminster or Europe. And it is our duty to recognise that you judge the situation by its outcomes, and the current outcomes are lamentable. Our Liberal duty is to remove the obstacles and barriers and constraints on women and minorities as far as the law will allow us. Now, Amendment 1 turns a radical motion into not very much. Essentially the status quo. If you vote for this, you're essentially saying there isn't much of a problem, so we don't need much of a solution. Think of what message that will send out from this conference today. And Liz Lynn asks whether the women MPs elected in 1999 would have been elected without zipping. Well, look who was elected 5 years earlier. 2 men. We agree with Grant Glanville. We're accepting Amendment 2. These reforms are, if anything, too modest. It would be surprising if more than a dozen seats would have AWS at the 2020 election. If you are happy to be 20 years behind the Labour Party on this, if you are happy to be behind the Tories, think of that. If you are happy that even if 150 MPs had been elected in 2015, just 26% of them would have been women and 9% from a BMA group, then vote against the motion. But if you want to look like a Liberal Party for the 21st century, if you want a diverse Liberal voice in this country, if you want outcomes rather than rhetoric, then vote for the motion, reject Amendment 1 and support Amendment 2. Conference, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Conference, we are now going to move to a series of 3 votes. The first vote will be on Amendment 1, for and against, then on Amendment 2, for and against, and then on the motion as amended or not. We have Omov. Everyone who's a party member who's registered can vote, so if you have the word voting on your pass, please hold it towards me so I can see it. I'm now going to take a vote on Amendment 1. Can I see all those in favour of Amendment 1, please? Thank you. Can I see those against Amendment 1? Yes, thank you. Amendment 1 is lost. Very clearly lost. Thank you very much. Amendment 2. Could I please see all those in favour of Amendment 2? Thank you. Can I see all those against? Yes, that's clearly carried. Thank you. On the motion as a whole, can I see all those in favour, please? Can I see all those against? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Can I thank my aide on the platform, Zoe O'Connell, and my aide in the hall, Andrew Wiseman, and I now hand the chair over for the next session, helping private renters. Thank you all for your contributions.
Good morning, Conference. If you're leaving, please do so quickly and quietly so that we can move on to the next item. Conference, I really do need quiet because we need to proceed with this important policy debate, and if you're making this much noise we won't be able to hear the speakers, so please everyone be quiet. Thank you very much. So we're now moving to the final policy debate of Conference, F21, a fair deal for private renters. The motion is printed on pages 59 and 60 of your agenda, and I'll be taking separate votes on lines 27 to 28 and lines 32 to 34. I've also received a request for a reference back, and I will be dealing with that request towards the end of the debate. So, I really need you to be quiet immediately, out of respect to the speakers in the debate. And will Elizabeth Jukes please stand by? And I now call Caroline Pidgeon, leader of our group on the London Assembly and Liberal Democrat candidate for mayor, to move the motion.
Thank you, Conference. And I have to say, follow that. My goodness, we've made history there. Good morning, Conference. And over the last decade, England's private rented sector has nearly doubled in size to become the second largest housing tenure behind owner occupation. In total, there are now over 4 million private rented sector properties across England, housing over 9 million people. So that's actually around 20% of the population. And in London, this increases to 1 in 4 of the population. And for many of these people, living in the private sector works well, with short tenancy agreements offering them the flexibility they need to move homes quickly for new jobs or career opportunities. But for many others, the sector has become a tenure of last resort rather than a destination of choice, with soaring house prices putting the dream of home ownership beyond the means of more and more middle-income households, and council homes harder to find than ever, thanks to the destructive actions of this Tory government. A growing number of middle-income households and young families have been left with no choice but to live in the private rented sector, with all the insecurity, risk and expense that brings. No longer is private renting the preserve of the hard-up or the young professional. Today, there are more than 1.6 million families in the private rented sector in England, and by 2025, it's estimated that almost 60% of 20 to 39-year-olds will be renting their homes. That's a huge change from today's housing market and something unimaginable even 10 years ago. The trouble is, the whole policy and regulatory approach to the sector remains stuck in the 1980s. It simply doesn't provide modern families with the stability they need, and too often standards are not up to scratch. Around a third of homes in the sector fail to meet the decent home standard. Nearly 1 in 7 are without central heating. 1 in 5 are without a working smoke alarm. And over 216,000 households are living in overcrowded conditions. And at the lower end of the market, rogue landlords continue to put tenant safety at risk by renting out dangerous or unfit properties, even sheds and loft spaces. And then, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, you discover there are hundreds of letting agents charging tenants excessive and unnecessary fees on top of already high rents and deposits. That's why it's now common practice for renters to be hit with demands for hundreds of pounds simply for renewing their tenancy or moving out of a property. Add in reservation fees, credit checks, reference checks and check-in fees. You know, it's not unheard of for these fees to total over £1,000. It's no wonder the private renter sector is now described as the property industry's Wild West due to its complete lack of effective regulation. And of course, as with any unregulated market, there's a desperately sad human cost to all this financial abuse, with around 1/4 of private renters admitting to borrowing money to pay letting fees, with 1 in 6 cutting down on food or heating to meet the costs. And that's according to a recent report by Shelter. You know, it's just not fair and it's not right. And that's why today I'm calling on the government to ban letting agents from ripping off tenants with unnecessary charges. And that's not all either. This motion puts forward a set of radical measures to really shift the balance of power decisively towards tenants and away from rogue landlords, starting by professionalising the sector with a mandatory licensing scheme for all private landlords. And at the same time, we need a financial boost for local authorities to ensure that they're able to provide tenants with expert housing and legal advice where needed. But it's clear we also need a review of the legislation applying to the private rented sector as a first step towards developing a comprehensive strategy for private renting. I think it's time too we introduced a new rule to give tenants first refusal to buy the home they're renting from a landlord if they decide to sell it during the tenancy, at market rate and according to an independent valuation. Incidentally, that's a right that's already given to leaseholders where a freeholder proposes to sell their interest in a building. And last but not least, we need financial support and encouragement from government for councils to develop their own and manage new private sector rented homes outside their existing stock, with the freedom to offer longer-term, family-friendly tenancies of 2, 3, 4 or longer years. Conference, whether it's people priced out of the rental market, being ripped off by unfair fees, living in substandard accommodation, or trying desperately to get a foot on the housing ladder, this motion offers support to those people struggling to cope in today's private rented homes. It's time we reform this sector, recognising the growing number of people renting privately, responded to their changing needs and creating a sector that's fit for the 21st century. I urge you to support the motion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Caroline. Will Michael Kilpatrick stand by? And I now call Elizabeth Jukes from City of Chester to speak in favour of the motion.
Conference. The main cause of homelessness is the ending of tenancies in the private renter sector. That's not my opinion. It's lines 12 and 13 of this motion. And let's just think about that for a moment. The main cause of homelessness. It isn't alcoholism, it isn't addiction, it isn't even domestic violence. It's simply a private tenancy coming to its end. And I hope, like me, that you are appalled by this statement. I moved to London in 1978 to go to university, and I stayed for 12 years. When I first left uni, I couldn't imagine being able to afford to buy a flat in London. But renting was affordable. But eventually, we bought the flat we lived in. And now, I know that that just would not have been possible for us. We could not have afforded to do it. A few years ago, my daughter returned to London to work, and I was shocked at the rent she had to pay. She has a master's degree and a good job, but even so, she had no hope of ever being able to get a mortgage. And with so much of her salary being taken up with rent, she couldn't save up for a deposit either. It was all an impossibility. She did manage to buy a house. She bought one a long way outside of London, with the family providing a deposit. Her monthly mortgage payment, she told me, on a 3-bedroomed house was exactly 1/3 of the rent she was paying on a very small flat in London. Conference. There is so much good in this motion. The lettings fees point is really strong. Average fees per move for tenants are between £350, £400. And many people have to take out a loan just to pay them. As Generation Rent said yesterday, most countries don't have them. Including the US, we are really behind. We've drafted in a point in this motion that deposits must not be more than a month's rent. This is important, as people just can't afford it. They can't afford to move out of their parents' house. A quarter of adults under 35 still live in their childhood bedrooms. My daughter managed to buy a house, but not everybody is so fortunate. Many people...
Sorry, will you draw your remarks to a close?
Many people are not so lucky. Conference, I urge you to support the motion.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Will Kay Barnard please stand by? And I now call Michael Kilpatrick to speak against lines 27 to 28 and 32 to 34.
Thank you very much. This isn't my first time speaking to conference, but it's the first time, but it's the first time that on the way to conference I've been bitten on the leg by a goose. Hence I missed the first 5 minutes of Tim's speech yesterday. I'm rather angry, but not because of the assault, because as a private landlord, and I'll admit I'm a private landlord, I have a house on the edge of Cambridge which I first bought and I moved into in 1998. 2 years later, I moved into a village, Whittlesford, outside Cambridge, and I maintain that first house and rent out. I don't feel I need any special privileges, although my situation is such that I wouldn't struggle. But so I'll lay myself open to you there. But I'm very unhappy, angry about the wording of this motion, which I think achieves very little. In South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge, we had a meeting and discussed possible amendments, and we suggested amending the two lines that are being removed, talking about professionalism and licensing, which are very vague terms. Doctors are professionals, but company directors aren't. They're registered. And we suggested having a register. But it's with a heavy heart, I suggest you support the motion removing the lines referring to professionalism, because it's a poorly worded, ambiguous term. And also the notion that we should arbitrarily force people to sell an asset on a fixed valuation, not on the free market, I think is entirely illiberal and unfair. Once you've stripped out those two sections of the two amendments, there's very little in the way of teeth and meat behind this motion. I'm very disappointed that it doesn't achieve a lot more in terms of providing more flexible rights, providing a better means for those tenants who wish to stay in a tenancy for longer. One suggestion we tried to make was that perhaps landlords could be obliged to offer a minimum of 12-month term short-hold tenancies, but tenants have an option to pull out of a contract within that period and have a short term, the trade-off being having a slightly longer period of notice within that period. So it's an asymmetric term of notice and compensation for landlord by increased terms of notice. So in many ways this could improve the situation, but this motion, I feel, tackles next to nothing, and I'm very disappointed in it. Please do support the motion because the amendment, one, because professionalism and licensing are vague, meaningless terms. Please support removing the section for forcing them to sell to the tenants first refusal, because a landlord could simply evict the tenants, wait for 2 months and then put it on the open market and guarantee getting a good price in a competitive open market. So it achieves nothing, the motion as it's written. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Will Tony Harris please stand by? And I now call Dr. Kay Barnard, the candidate for Mayor of Bristol, who will be speaking for lines 27 and 28 and lines 40 to 43.
Thank you. So what does the Office of National Statistics say about Bristol? Bristol is the city with the second biggest contribution to the economy, the national economy, after London. It's the centre of IT, the media, high-tech manufacturing and financial services. It's a thriving, dynamic city. But that doesn't tell you the other side of the story. The number of homeless in Bristol has shot up, as have the prices for accommodation. Yes, we've had people sleeping in tents in our parks during the coldest part of the winter. The private rented sector now accounts for a quarter of all the accommodation in the city, a staggering rise in the last 10 years. Many of these are HMOs, houses in multiple occupation, which are already registered with the local authority. What Bristol does have is a great voluntary scheme run by a social enterprise called Acorn, which runs a voluntary ethical lettings charter for both the letting agents and the landlords. It's a great scheme, so the good landlords and agents all sign up. But that's not enough, is it? Because many local people have to live in the substandard accommodation from rented housing from those landlords who don't sign up. Or they also potentially face short-term lets coming to an end and they're being told to leave so the landlord can raise the rent. We need a better system, both for lettings agents and for landlords. Whether a national system is the right way to go, I'm not sure. I would give power to local authorities who already have the right to register landlords in areas where there are social problems and force them to upgrade their property to decent standards. As for new social housing, we need new ideas, solutions encouraging developers, housing associations and councils to work together to provide social housing. And it's not just the ring-fence finance inside the housing revenue account, it's the land ownership too. Cooperatives or community interest councils are possible solutions, but one thing must be clear, their finances must be accountable and transparent, no hiding behind freedom of information, from freedom of information. Building more houses is definitely the long-term answer, but in the short term, I have no doubt that we need better regulation of the private rented sector. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Can I ask Emily Davey to stand by? And I now call Tony Harris from Newbury in West Berkshire to speak against lines 27 and 28.
Good morning, Conference. I come to you today with over 20 years of experience in residential lettings outside of London. As you will have seen, lines 27 to 28 of the policy proposal call for the lettings of homes in the private rented sector to be professionalised through the mandatory licensing of landlords. Now, you might be surprised to know that the latest English Housing Survey government report, Households, indicated that over 2/3 of private rented sector tenants were satisfied with the repairs carried out by their landlords, and a similar proportion were satisfied with the housing services their landlord provided. So the majority of landlords and letting agents are law-abiding and ethical, but 30% are not. Many landlords agree that it is important to regulate the industry so that we can continue to weed out rogue landlords and to ensure a fair deal for tenants. Anything else gives the industry a bad name, causes a problem with property insurance, and attracts additional legislation. It is generally accepted that the problem of rogue landlords is particularly acute in London, and a number of boroughs, such as Newham, have already implemented mandatory licensing. So the intent of mandatory licensing is clear and certainly has its place in London. But government estimates that around 1.5 million to 2 million private residential landlords in the UK as a whole are there. So it's a large number. If mandatory licensing were adopted for each one, then the responsibility for this would fall to local authorities, who are already under-resourced, underfunded and overstretched. We'd end up with a situation where we have licensing but no enforcement, which defeats the intent. In April 2007, the Deposit Protection Scheme introduced the idea of legislating landlords through letting agents. Landlords who rented independently outside of an agent register separately, but landlords renting through an agent are covered. The scheme has worked well because many landlords outside of London rent through agents, and there are only 18,000 of these in the UK, a more manageable number for local authorities to deal with this. I submitted an amendment earlier which called for the letting of homes in the private rented sector to be professionalised through the mandatory licensing of letting agents and independent landlords. Therefore, Conference, I urge you to vote to delete lines 27-28 in the expectation that mandatory licensing will be reviewed at some future time after proper consultation and redrafting, so that we'll end up with a policy that can be properly enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Can I ask Amna Ahmed to stand by? And I now call Emily Davey from Kingston Borough, the number 2 on our list for the London Assembly, to speak for the motion as a whole.
Conference. I'm a housing solicitor. I've spent over 20 years working primarily in the rented sector, in legal aid, with councils and housing associations for the charity Shelter. In those 20 years, in my experience, it has got worse, and worse in housing. Yet the odd thing is that over that time, we've seen lots of new legislation promising to improve things for tenants. So how can these things how could it have got worse when the laws have got stronger? One of the key reasons is local authorities no longer have the money to use those laws and take enforcement action. Often they cannot even do the basics, like prosecute landlords for illegally evicting their tenants. One council recently said to me they had not prosecuted landlords for illegal evictions for 15 years. Without additional funding support, many local authorities can only stand by and watch, while some private landlords break all the rules in the book and whatever rules Parliament chooses to put in that book. The Conservatives are telling private tenants that they are on their side with their new banning orders for rogue landlords. Yet those banning orders rely on prosecutions the councils can't afford to take. The Tories know that because they cut their budgets. By voting for those cuts, Zach Goldsmith is effectively helping those criminal landlords escape the law. Dare I say it, London's Conservatives are now almost accomplices to housing crime. Sadiq Khan is not much better. If he was serious about tackling London's housing crisis, he would have the vision for London's renters beyond backing private developers in doing whatever they want. If Sadiq understood London's housing crisis, he would follow what Caroline has outlined in his policy today: a new renting model to bring longer tenancies at lower rents by allowing councils to build and rent out properties on the private market with new, more tenant-friendly tenancies. Giving London's middle-income renters, like teachers, nurses, and police officers, the housing and financial security they need to do their jobs. So, Conference, good housing is not just about getting the right legislation. It is about being able to afford to use that legislation. It is not just about fixing the existing housing. It's about providing an alternative model. And that's what Caroline does in this motion. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Emily. Will Tony Vickers please stand by for the reference back? And I now call Amna Ahmad from Streatham, who's the GLA candidate for Sutton and Croydon, to speak for the motion as a whole.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Conference. I will be talking a little bit about why you should support this motion as a whole. We've heard incredible arguments, costed, evidence-based arguments as to why we need these changes that are proposed today for the private rental sector. But let me take you back for a moment to why we need it in a fundamental way and why we as Liberal Democrats should and must support this motion as a whole. Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights declares many things that I know all of us hold dear. It makes fantastic commitments for us as human beings on justice, on freedom of speech, and security and dignity of people. It also has a comment in there which I think is incredibly important. Everyone has the right to a standard adequate for the health and well-being of himself, and it does say himself, but I'll add herself, and her family. And it's incredibly, incredibly important. This is enshrined. We know this to be true, and it's absolutely critical. But why are we, as a country, so slow to act to make the changes that are needed, the changes that face the facts? We are no longer a majority country of homeowners. There are, we've heard from Caroline the numbers, not just in London, but across the country. 22% of households are now in the private rented sector. We must move with the times. This motion does that, and it helps us do that in a way which I believe is really key to our fundamental rights
as humans and something that we as Liberal Democrats must really fundamentally support. In my area, so I grew up in South London, I have a personal experience of what it's like to face homelessness, and I also hear from local residents that this is something that they are looking at. It happens every single day. I hear about it as a candidate, and as I said, I've had personal experiences of what that's like. The impact on children of constantly moving, it's well documented. It impacts their health and their well-being. As a child, myself, and in my own family, this is something that I have seen time and time again. It takes children away from education, it takes them away from their communities. And we must not see this motion as pitting region against region or landlords against private renters. It is not about that. It's about cracking down on those who are abusing the system whilst helping the majority who are actually now in a situation where they're not through choice, but they are renting, and we must do the best and the absolute best that we can for those people. I believe, as I've said, that it's a fundamental human right. We must do more as Liberal Democrats to support it, and I believe the motion as a whole helps us do that. If we take those lines out, we leave holes in the motion. And frankly, it is all of our responsibilities, private renters, homeowners, and all of us as Liberal Democrats, to do much more about it. As Liberal Democrats, I believe we are sometimes accused of being too theoretical. This is real. This is a real thing that we can all do. Please support this motion as a whole.
Thank you, Amna. Will Chris White please stand by? I've received a request for a reference back of this motion from Tony Vickers of Newbury in West Berkshire. So the process is that I will read out the request and then I'll ask you whether you wish to hear a mini debate on the reference back. So I request the motion be referred back to FPC so that the subject can be given further consideration before returning to conference. Whilst acknowledging the very high priority that needs to be given to the subject, the motion contains no evidence that the measures called for will achieve any significant overall improvement in the plight of private tenants. It was drafted hastily. Voting against the motion would, however, imply that conference rejects the whole set of measures as well as the sound analysis of the situation in lines 1 to 25. So, if you get your voting badges ready, can I see all those who wish to hear a mini debate on the reference back? Thank you. And those who do not wish to hear that? So clearly conference does not wish to hear the mini debate and the reference back falls. No, I haven't got time to speak. No. So I now call Chris White to summate for the main motion.
Hello, me again. As Caroline said, the private rented sector is the property market's Wild West increasingly. Poor quality, high charges, hidden fees that weren't necessarily there a decade or so ago. Ordinary people being dinned time and time again, the weakest feeding some of the richest. And this is a problem now. As Emily Davies says, it's getting worse and worse as councils feel they can no longer do their duty. And this is real human misery. Generation Rent has produced some figures. 40% in the private rented sector are cutting down on heating in order to pay their rent. Worse still, a third are cutting down on food. This is in the United Kingdom that this sort of thing is happening. It is shameful. 30% of homes are not decent, and 17% are actually physically unsafe. Now, there are good landlords, but they get precious little recognition because of all the cowboys. And that's why we've used the term professionalism. We regulate food. We regulate pubs. We should be regulating things which are even more important, which is the homes in which people live, and sadly, homes in which sometimes people die because they are not regulated. And it's not just London. It's not just London. It's a massive problem in London, no doubt about that at all. It's clearly also Bristol. where there has been a massive increase in the sector, and there's the Acorn scheme, which helps a bit, but we need more. But it's also St Albans, leafy St Albans. It's lovely, it's got a cathedral, it's got posh houses. I live in a posh house. But if you actually go down the shopping streets, you go behind the shops, those little flats which are tucked away at the back, where you actually see from the electoral register an annual turnover of tenants, there you see poor landlording even in a place like St Albans. Disrupted lives, disrupted education, and for the children who are unfortunate enough to live there. Now, we consulted both ALDC and the LGA group in creating this motion. In fact, it is actually proposed by ALDC. I am merely a creature of ALDC in speaking to you this morning. Local authorities are key to this, and the problem, of course, is local authorities do not have sufficient money, as we heard from Emily, to do the work necessary. We would envisage charging fees, but obviously the fees mustn't be so high that they put up rents and make the matter worse. We are generally calling for increased funding for local authorities to deal with this most basic of needs in our community, to deal with this, frankly, increasing emergency. I urge you to keep in the professionalism, to keep in the concept of being able to buy your own home in certain circumstances, and vote for the motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We now move to a series of 3 votes. So, firstly, can I see those who wish to delete lines 27 to 28? Thank you. And can I see those who wish to retain those lines? Those lines are clearly retained. Now, can I see those who wish to delete lines 32 to 34? Thank you. And those who wish to retain those lines are also clearly retained. So now can I see those who are in favour of the substantive motion, which is unamended? Thank you. And those against? A small number against, but that motion was carried overwhelmingly. So thank you very much to the speakers in the debate, and thank you to Gareth Epps, my aide on the stage, and Shaz Sheehan, my aide in the hall. And we now, if you'd now please bear with us for a couple of minutes while we reset the stage ahead of today's final session.
Good morning, Conference. If I could please ask you to take your seats. Thank you. Conference, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage the President of the Liberal Democrats, Sal Brinton.
So here we are, already at the end of our conference, and I want to say thank you to all of those who have made this conference not just possible, but a stunning success. So from all of us here, a huge thank you to all the staff here at York Barbican who have hosted the conference and the exhibition. To Make It York, for giving us such a warm city welcome, putting on fantastic welcome reception, arranging great local deals, and providing excellent information about everything that the city has to offer. And we're supported by fantastic suppliers who care about the success of conference just as much as we do. So to Chris, Dan, and Quirk, they make this fantastic stage set and always go above and beyond the call of duty. And the same goes for the fantastic Aztec team, who supply all of our AV and IT needs throughout conference. They keep our HQ teams online, up and running, and events running smoothly. Thank you to them. And as always, please give a special thanks to our British Sign Language interpreters, the fabulous Claire Edwards and Jane Barnett, who provide such an important service. We are supported throughout by SPA Complete Event Services, who ensure that we run a safe and secure conference and who, as always, have shown great humour and professionalism all weekend. And a big thank you also to our conference sponsors, exhibitors, advertisers, and fringe organisers who help create such an interesting debate outside of the main conference going on here in the auditorium. And a very big thank you to the Federal Conference Committee and the Federal Policy Committee, to the utterly amazing stewards team, and thank you to the parliamentary staff and the whip's offices. And a huge thanks as well to our HQ teams. They worked so hard over the weekend. The Policy Office, the Campaigns, Diversity and Candidates Offices, the Press Office, the Membership Team, the International Office and the Fundraising Team. And of course, last, but by no means least, the Conference Office. And I want to thank them for their amazing work. And finally, I want to say two more thank yous. The first is to you, the members, for being here. Not just for being here, but for demonstrating that OMOV was the right decision to take in September. The debates that we've had, 3 in particular, on the regulation of cannabis, on fracking, and this morning's on the diverse MPs. You have shown so many new members and first-time attendees speaking at conference, influencing debate and changing outcomes. Thank you all very much. And my final thanks are very much for my friend and colleague and my leader, Tim Farron. Now, the last few months since we last met have not been easy, but he has continued to demonstrate his absolute integrity and his principle against all the public odds elsewhere, fighting not just for the policy areas that he and we care so much about, such as his fight for the refugees, particularly unaccompanied children, but also fighting within the party for us to help get back on our feet so that we will be able to deliver the motion that we passed this morning, as well as deliver more MPs in 2020. Thank you, Tim. Conference, it's all but over now. And York, we are so grateful to you for putting up with us once again and indeed welcoming us with open arms. And I started this conference by saying York is open for business after the floods. We have to take that message back with us. Please pass it on to your friends. And I hope, York, that you know that our being here demonstrates that you are open for business. And we're almost ready for the final act that you're really all waiting for. But just before we hear from Tim, please welcome our Treasurer, Lord Mike German.
There's the clue in the music. Hello, Michael German. I'm the party treasurer for first time at the conference as your party treasurer, elected by the FE in December. And just in case you want to know what the role of the party treasurer is, it's about money in, not about money out. It's not about managing the books or what you spend the money on. It's about getting the money in. And it's a very important part of political life. And there's one thing that I want to say more importantly than anything else, is that this party, the things that we do day by day, the actions we take, the campaigns we fight, none of it would be possible without the cash to do it. Now, I'd like to think about this conference a bit, because this conference, we have the largest number of first-time attendees ever at a spring conference. And I think it's made a huge difference. Let's have an indication. If you are a first-time attendee at any conference, if you are a first-time attendee, just put your hand up. Just put your hand. Look at that. About 1 in 5. Give them a clap. Because what you have done has made this a phenomenally successful conference. I think you've energized us, given us great spirit. And I think this party is all the richer for it. And thank you very much for everything you've done. I'm going to ask you to do one thing more, of course, and that's about asking for money. Now, I think there are some people who sometimes feel a little uncomfortable about asking anyone for money. If you are a person who feels uncomfortable about asking someone for money, just put your hand up, just show me. If you feel uncomfortable, there are a few. Okay, right. So, in fact, more than a few. So, I've got a job to do today, and my job is to demystify asking for money and to give you 4 easy steps why and how you can ask for money. Because, unfortunately, it is what we have to do. Unfortunately, people are prepared to give. So, you've got to look for the opportunities which are available to us. 4 easy steps. The first one, you identify what is your ambition. What's our ambition as a party? What do we think, whether it's locally, in our community, or whether it's here in the UK? The second thing is, why does that matter? Why does that ambition matter? And the third thing, how much will it cost to deliver that ambition that we all share? And fourthly, of course, asking you how you can help, and asking the people you're asking to tell them about the gift that they're making and what effect it will have. So let's just translate that into the context of this badge that I'm wearing and most of you are wearing here today. Is it an ambition for this party for the United Kingdom to remain a member of the European Union? Yes. Right. That's a very good ambition to have. So let's make that our ambition. And the second part of it was, why? What does it matter? Why does it matter? And I would say it matters because of the jobs, the security that it provides, not just for us, but for our children and our grandchildren as well. And what does it cost in order for us to remain a member of the United Kingdom? Third thing. And of course, that's the summation of all the leaflets that we've got to have printed, all the means of communication that we make with the electorate, all the things that we're going to be doing before the 23rd of June. All of those have a price to them because they all cost money in some way or other. So let's just call it squillions, all right? Squillions is what it might cost. I'll come to something more concrete in the end. So the question is, are you prepared to ask someone to secure the future of you, your children, and your children's children, and the jobs and security of this country? If you're prepared to do that, then you should be prepared to ask someone for money. And we're going to actually have a little experiment, because I noticed there was some sensitivity here. So we're now going to try a little bit of an experiment. Never been done before at a party conference. There are 15 people, and I don't know where they're sitting because they were pre-selected by, well, not their people, but the chairs were pre-selected by the stewards earlier. 15 people sitting in a seat which has a gold star on it. And you are our Gold Star Award winners, but I just need to identify who you are. The 15 people. Could you have a look on your seat? You won't be able to do it unless you see the seat back. You have to turn around and have a look. Have a good look. And when you have identified that you have a gold star on your seat back, would you please put your hand up? 1 there. Any more? 2, 3. Some more? Somebody over here? Yes, 5. Can you all see at the backs up there? There's one at the back up there. Okay. Can you also check, in case there's an empty chair next to you, just look and see the empty chair next to you. Has that got a gold star on it? If it does, you're the gold star winner if you've got an empty chair next to you. All right. So stewards are going to give the 15 people who have got gold stars a golden envelope. This is about gold awards. Come on. Gold awards, golden envelopes. Come on. Gold star. And there are prizes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, there are. And I will give you a clue to the prize. The winner will receive tickets and hospitality. No more information than that will be given. Tickets and hospitality, but I will tell the winner more afterwards. Now, the challenge to the people who have got a gold star on their seat and have got a gold star envelope is I'm going to give you 3 minutes. In that 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you to talk to the people sitting around you, within communication around you, using those 4 arguments. What's your ambition? Why does it matter? What does it cost? I want to ask the people to make a concrete ask. Folding it money is obviously better. Would you put it in your envelope? And also, if you haven't got money with you, you can fill the forms in which the golden envelope has contained with it, and a pen, I think, as well. So you'll be able to put into the golden envelope your pledge. So the 15 people, your job is to make the ask. And you're going to have 3 minutes in which to do it. 3 minutes in which to make that ask. And where's my timekeeper? My golden timekeeper is here. The golden counter. Are we ready? 3 minutes starting from now. Now then, go and argue, watch them at it, you can see them, making sure. By the way, there's somebody in the posh seats here, you can see, can't you? In the posh seats. We want to see how much money comes to the posh seats, don't we? Yes. I'm going to say something else while we're talking. There will be buckets in a moment, so if you're not in the good fortunate position of being around somebody who's asking you for money, there will be people coming around with buckets in a moment. It's quite often, I'm going to talk over this, so don't worry about the arguments. I wondered all my life as a party member coming to conferences why we never knew how much money was made at these financial appeals. Last spring, a party conference just before the general election, this event, this fundraiser, raised £9,000. So from 1,000 people in the hall, £9,000, do the maths, that was £9 a head. Now it's an awkward sum, £9, so what I would like you to think about is adding a pound to it, because that's a much better round number. So the challenge today is to raise £10,000. That's £10 a head on average, £10 a head on average. And in terms of my 4 things, that's the concrete ask. £10 on average from everybody. Oh, by the way, I want to square or cube it. Shall I cube it for the posh seats or square it? Cube it, okay. They're by popular acclaim, the posh seats multiply by 3, please. Multiply it 3 times. You know, 10 times 10 times 10, is that right? What's that? What's 10 times 10 times 10? 100, is it? 1,000. Yes, I thought it might be. Okay. Baroness Garden is doing her best here to get £1,000 ahead from the posh seats. We will see when it comes back. Now then, how much longer have our people got? 50. 50 seconds left for the golden awards. With your envelopes, have you got them filled up? You've still got about 3/4 of a minute for their 3 minutes are up. Good, I can see people breathing over. I can see coinage coming. I can see coinage coming. Sell the pitch. Tell them the story. Make sure that it's the best. And give me 15 seconds. I can't read. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now then, could you seal the golden envelopes? Seal the gold. Oops, stop. First of all, count how much money is in it first. Count how much money you've got, seal it, and put the amount on the front. And don't forget, if you want to be the gold winner, please put your name on the front of the gold envelope. Put your name on the front, count the amount of money, and pass it back to the stewards. And we will try and announce the winner and how much before we get any... Well, actually, it should be the posh seats at £1,000 ahead. I think it's not bad, is it? Do you think I should tell you how much they... Well, I don't know, maybe... Yeah. Maybe not. So, our expectation here today is 1,000 people with £10 ahead, £10,000. That's what I'm looking for. And we're going to check and see whether we get that. How are the buckets doing? Are they still at the top? There's people right at the back who haven't seen the buckets yet. Let's try this one. Let's try this as an experiment. How many people have not seen a bucket yet? Right. Look at all these people. Keep your hands up, please. There's people over here who haven't seen a bucket. Hands up again. Those people who have not seen a bucket. I can't see the very back. Buckets at the back. Good. I can see some adventurous person with his mobile phone on the torch, writing figures down on a piece of paper. It's in the daily notices. You can put it in the bucket. You can make it all work for you. £10,000, £10 ahead, that's a direct ask. Are we nearly there with the buckets? How are we doing with the other ones? We're looking.
There's a lot more money in it than we thought, so we don't think we're going to be able to announce the...
So
just get them to...
How much do you think we got in some of them?
I don't know, there's just have to... I think just say that if you write your name, we'll announce... And
Yeah. Have we got any figures on them yet? Well, I have a piece of urgent information. Several of the winners of the Golden Award stars have written on their envelope, "Too much to count." I think you've all done brilliantly, thank you. But what we're going to do is we are going to count, and we will have a result, but it means we've got to count each envelope separately, and the envelopes are only just coming in. Now, I don't, as you know what this is, by the way, for first-time visitors to conference, this is the warm-up act for Tim Farron, okay? That's why I'm wearing a tie, because you'll realise that it's probably the very first time this weekend you will have seen Tim Farron wearing a tie, so I thought I wouldn't be outdone. We will let you know who is the winner. We have to do that, but we obviously can't count quickly enough the envelopes which are only just coming back in, and all the... Oh, look, there's lots and lots of money in it. I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud of this party. So there's the 4 things. Just let me remind you of them. What's your ambition? Why does it matter? What will you be doing to make it happen? How much does it cost? And then what you're going to ask people for, and what will their gift pay for? We will return to this at our next conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all very much for all the money that you've put in today, for all the donations you've given to this very, very important task which we all share. It's a task for all of us, not a task for just some of us. And I look forward to seeing you all again in Brighton.
I grew up just a few minutes from here. I loved the kind of sense of community there was at the time, but I feel like a lot of that has changed as people are moving off as part of the regeneration process. There's residents who have lived here for 30, 40 years, and I think they need someone who actually knows what it's like to live in this area for a sustained period of time.
I grew up in Southwark, so have been very involved in the community and local politics since then. I love being a councillor. I think local government is incredibly important in people's lives. Being a Liberal is very much about allowing people to live their own life. Trying to help people through a journey of a problem is often what we do.
So I've lived here for about 14 years. Community for me means people working together and also helping each other out and being there for each other. Yeah, I've had the odd thing where, people have said, there's a cat up a tree at 11 o'clock at night, and I've gone round to their houses and I've stood there and I've tried to get it down myself. It's not about money or anything else, it's just seeing that people have actually got their answer. And if they haven't got the right answer, they still appreciate the fact that you went that extra mile for them.
I'm doing business since 1994. I came in this country. Not everybody is a businessman. Mostly people are local people and are living on normal basic wages. And when they get a tax credit cut and the other things get cut and the housing benefit cut, then people are upset. We need to provide to the society whatever they need. The Liberal Democrat is very easy to approach, and if you leave them message, they come back to you.
As a councillor, you've got to be approachable, and you've got to be able to be approached at any time. I know when I go downtown for a pint of milk or whatever, Margaret, she doesn't send me anymore because I might be down there for 2 or 3 hours where people stop and have a chat, but they also want something sorted or whatever. But that's the nature of being a councillor.
I think community is a group of people who care about each other. People want to be together and to have a space in which to do that. I work as well, and I have a small family, but I still find time to do it because I think it's really important that I do something for my local community.
Young people are interested in community and are interested in politics, and I think it's important that we move away from the idea that young people don't care about community issues. My values as a Liberal Democrat are freedom, equality and opportunity, making sure that whoever you are, wherever you're from, you're able to access the opportunities you want to succeed in life and live life in the way you want to.
I see in Westminster loads of people who spend all the time just fixated on gassing, talking within that hothouse atmosphere in Parliament and frankly achieving very little. Politics is really done out here on the streets. It's done in people's living rooms, it's done in community centres, it's done in the places where they have their normal everyday lives. So you don't just turn up every 4 years looking for someone's vote, you actually immerse yourself in the community you're part of. You turn up week in, week out, you hold a stall in the town centre, you knock on doors, you deliver leaflets, you tell people what's going on, because your job, I think, as a politician, MP or councillor, is to make a difference for people. That's where I came from, that's why I'm involved in politics in the first place, and it's about time we got our hands dirty more as a society and tried to fix things.
Audio Jungle.
Well done.
On time this year, yeah. So you will be unsurprised to hear that I was recently interviewed by Stylist magazine. Yeah. They asked me all sorts of exciting questions about my colossal sense of glamour. They also wanted me to choose a woman to write about who had been my hero. So I wanted to be completely honest and picked the woman who was indeed my hero, a lady called Neva Orrell. She was a local councillor in Leyland when I first joined the Liberals. But Stylist magazine said they wanted me to pick someone a bit more well-known. So I tried Shirley Williams. They said no. I tried Elizabeth Warren. Nope. So in the end, they asked me to write about that well-known woman, Bill Clinton. Yeah, so Neva Orrell. First off, she was actually a woman, okay? But also Neva was a local teacher. She was a councillor in our area when I first joined the Liberals. She was 4 foot 10 inches high, had a tangerine rinse, and to the best of my knowledge, is the only person Tony Greaves has ever been scared of. And Neva had lived through the war. She'd lost loved ones, she'd witnessed devastation, the grief and the tragedy of war, and she became convinced that we must work together to build a world where hatred and war might be overcome. She wanted to join a movement that would fight for tolerance, peace and freedom, for the things that would make a repeat of that war least likely. In 1949, she joined the Liberals. And Neva spent the next 53 years of her life being the greatest servant that her community in Leyland had ever known, getting people rehoused, improving roads, cleaning up the environment, meeting the needs of individuals throughout that town. Now, maybe some would be dismissive about this. A great internationalist, a great liberal, who then spent her time on pavement politics. But that is how it should be. Because if you are a liberal, then you will walk the walk committed to your community, the place you live, the experiences and identities you share, the people with whom you feel you belong. Community is what you make it, and where you make a difference. We say we care about people, we prove it by serving the people, empowering them, getting things done, and it's what makes us liberals. We stand for election not to be something, but because we want to do something. We campaign not to be grand, but to do grand things, to make a difference. It's what makes us different. So, in the town of Leyland, I joined the Liberal Party at 16, and you may be staggered to hear that this was not a carefully calculated career move. Not a career move, and not a cop-out either. I didn't join a pressure group. I joined a movement determined to use power to make a difference and give people opportunities. Because every family, every small business, everyone in Britain deserves a clear path to fulfil their own ambition. Now, as well as Stylist magazine, I've also featured on the pages of Autocar magazine. See, they had heard that my car had been written off in the floods in December. They were impressed by my dedication and commitment to something so beaten and battered. They also wanted to know about the Volvo. You were there first. Yes. It was early December, and I'd agreed to do an interview with BBC News about the floods. Half an hour before I was supposed to be on air, I was in the car with my kids, and the river wall in front of me broke. In 2 seconds flat, the car had filled up to our waists. We had to bail out, and we had to do it quickly. We were a few miles from the nearest village, stranded and completely soaked, stood by the side of the road, and then the phone went. It was the BBC. So, John Simpson style, me and the kids reported live from the scene while my Volvo... Absolutely true. While my Volvo and a very large number of precious prefab Sprout CDs disappeared from view. Now, we lost a car. That is nothing. I lost my beloved prefab Sprout CDs, and even they can be replaced. But friends of mine, loads of friends of mine, lost their homes, lost their businesses. And here in York, more than 600 homes and businesses, some of them just a couple of hundred yards away from here, flooded, were underwater, and many are yet to recover. And yet, when I took a look around York and visited businesses like I did on Friday, I see the same tremendous spirit I see at home in Cumbria. And it is testament to the determination of people who come together and support one another. When a community is tested, you see its true character. And as we see by being here for conference, York is open for business. Cumbria, the Scottish borders, the north, we are all open for business. Even when this government is barely lifting a finger to help, the spirit of the people is the real northern powerhouse. Now, within a few weeks of my birth in 1970, two disastrous things happened, neither of which were my fault. One, England got knocked out by West Germany 3-2 in the World Cup quarter-finals. Two, the Liberals had an electoral disaster that made last May look like quite a good result by comparison. We almost disappeared altogether, but we fought back. And we fought back not by accident, but by careful design. And we fought back by making a virtue of the fact that there is more to life than Westminster. Young Liberals led the rebuild of our party by taking our philosophy and our ideals into their communities and putting them into practice. They got their hands well and truly dirty, turning a belief in the individual into action, galvanising communities, winning change, challenging the self-satisfied power of the Town Hall and of Whitehall. In 2016, let us choose that path back to power. Be clear, community politics is what we are for. The establishment is increasingly out of reach and out of touch locally, nationally. It is down to us to make the difference. In every community, I want us to be the antidote to the kind of politics that makes people go off politics altogether. Now, in 1997, the Liberal Democrats made a tremendous leap forward, securing 46 MPs. One of those MPs was our excellent Chief Whip, Tom Brake. Now, I recently discovered that Tom has also been a magazine star. It was an interview that had originally been offered to me, but without me knowing it, they decided in my team that Tom was much better suited for such a challenge. So you all have the press office to thank for the fact that the centrefold in Men's Health magazine was... Very disappointing, really. The centrefold in Men's Health magazine was not this gut before you, but the more toned one of the Chief Whip. The feature involved posing without a shirt. Yeah? It involved exercising every day for 7 weeks and eating healthily. Alistair was absolutely gutted not to have been asked. Never mind, sorry. I did clear it with him. So look, 1997, we all remember that. 2000 and 2005, our numbers increased still further to 52, to 62. We got to 63 when Willie won Dunfermline. Indeed, we reached our peak, for now, at a point when we didn't even have a leader. Yeah, don't go getting any ideas. Well, because we're an autonomous people's collective, that might work, mind you. It might, yeah. So 2010, you know the story. We did the right thing, but we paid a very heavy price. We put country before party, and I am dead proud that we did. But were the seeds of our setback in May sown many years before? Because Westminster can be a beguiling place. When you are there, there's a constant temptation to try and be like everybody else. I mean, we've had a full shadow cabinet. We've had junior spokespeople. We've even had some, enough MPs to have some troublesome backbenchers. And you even have that with 8. Which is a good thing. But we must always ask ourselves, when we are a Westminster force, is it too tempting to get obsessed with Parliament that we forget the community politics that put us there? Westminster's rules are laid down by parties that have an opposite agenda to ours, with powerful vested interests to protect, not people to liberate. For the establishment parties, it is the best old boys club in town, and they have stacked the rules to protect it. We arrive in the big league on our terms, but we too often attempt to remain on theirs. When we ran the biggest councils in this country, Liverpool and Newcastle, Bristol, Cardiff, Edinburgh and Sheffield, we did so because of who we were. We were never the council's representatives to the people, we were the people's representatives to the council. And as we rebuild, and we will, and as we regain those councils, as we rebuild, as we will, we must continue to be the people's representatives in Parliament too. We must return to our roots. No matter the office, always retaining true and remaining true to our instincts. It's time to focus not on parliamentary games, but on real life. It is time we got back to community politics. So in 2008, I started a campaign with my team to bring a chemotherapy unit to my local hospital in Kendal. We walked the 44-mile route from the nearest centre to our own hospital to highlight our case. We gathered 10,000 signatures and 600 people wrote their own personal accounts to the local trust. We campaigned, we lobbied, and we stood up for our community. In 2011, we got it. Shortly afterwards, an elderly couple called me over in the street, and the lady told me that they had decided she wasn't going to go through with treatment for her cancer because she couldn't cope with the vast round trip. But when the new unit opened, she changed her mind. It's about making a difference to people's lives. In Bradford, Jeanette Sunderland saw that a library was closing. She pulled together local businesses and not only saved the library, but raised £1.4 million to turn it into an enterprise centre, creating jobs and new businesses. It was Simon Hughes who heard the plight of a gay Iranian man who was facing deportation to a country that had killed his boyfriend. To this day, he says that Simon's action saved his life. In Sutton, the Liberal Democrats have just secured funding for the second largest cancer centre in the world that will create 13,000 jobs and develop 2 new cancer drugs every 5 years. And here in York, Keith Aston and his team passed a budget protecting frontline services, increased investment in community-based mental health care. And it was Michael Moore. And it was our Michael Moore who secured a commitment from the government to spend 0.7% commitment on international aid. Our commitment to the international community. Money which is currently saving hundreds of lives across the world. Community politics at every level. Lives across the country and across the globe. Better because of the work we do. The work that you do. So, the moral test of a government is how that government treats those who are in the sunrise of their life, the children, in the twilight of their life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the disabled. Those are the words of Hubert Humphrey, Lyndon Johnson's Vice President. There is absolutely not a shadow of a doubt that Hubert Humphrey would mark this Conservative government an abject failure. Just this week, they voted through plans to cut £30 a week from the benefits of sick and disabled people. They are pushing ahead with cuts to universal credit, so low-income working families will lose on average £1,000 a year. And they still plan to exclude youngsters from being able to claim housing benefit, leaving vulnerable young people with nowhere else to go. Their benefit cuts are a calculated political choice, hurting millions of people. And their latest move is to cut personal independence payments by more than £1 billion. 640,000 people with disabilities are set to lose vital support that helps them to live truly independent lives. As is his style, This Chancellor uses smoke and mirrors to distort the truth. His clever accounting and theatrical budgets mask the true scale of what he has planned. His agenda isn't just a parliamentary game. It strikes right at the heart of the communities we represent, and we will not stand for it. You see, we start not with the politics, but with people, with communities. But the Chancellor is currently placing the very foundations of a happy and healthy community under threat. Our schools, our homes, our environment, even our health. The basic building blocks for life that can have the biggest impact. On housing, a decent home isn't just a roof over somebody's head. It is an opportunity to get a job. It's an opportunity for security and peace of mind. So tackling the housing crisis must be the first priority for any community politician. Build more affordable homes. Invest in house building. Set up local housing companies by councils. Create a housing investment bank to bring in private capital and allow councils to borrow to build. On education, the pupil premium is not just a few quid chucked into the pot. It is tailored support to help a child to thrive. Education is what creates that level playing field so that every individual can play a full part in their community. We will defend the pupil premium we fought so hard to introduce. We will fight short-sighted cuts to school budgets, and we will challenge political interference in our schools. We will trust our teachers. On the environment, climate change isn't just a fashionable esoteric campaign. It is a battle for the future of our planet. The environment is local, it is global. Home insulation, solar panels, flood protection, the world around us, the air we breathe and the land we rely on to survive are under threat. And on health. Parity of esteem between mental and physical health is not just technical jargon. We will stand alongside Norman Lamb as he leads our battle to make sure someone with a life-threatening eating disorder has the same right to treatment for their condition as a patient with cancer. Housing, education, environment, health, essential for our community, essentials in life, all relying on Britain's incredible public sector and the people who work in it. And at a time when they should be focusing on improving public services, this government is locked in a dispute with junior doctors. Instead of taking action to safeguard the future of the NHS, the Conservative government is running it into the ground. In coalition, the Conservatives had to be dragged kicking and screaming just to fund the very basics. Norman refused to back down when they tried to diminish our health service, and now, on their own, the Tories are hoping we won't notice what is happening. Instead of working to strengthen and protect the NHS, Jeremy Hunt is jeopardising it. Junior doctors are working tirelessly for the good of the British people, and they have people's lives in their hands. Yet, as we heard on Friday from Dr. Salia Hassan, they feel under attack. We should be working with them to save the NHS. They are the future of healthcare. Jeremy Hunt, enough is enough. You have mishandled this dispute with junior doctors. You have lost their confidence. You have lost the confidence of NH staff. You have lost the confidence of the British people. You have proved that the NHS is at risk in Tory hands. And the battle with junior doctors is just the tip of the iceberg. The scale of this crisis is too big. It is time for a full cross-party commission. As Norman said, we need a new beverage deal for the 21st century. We cannot allow our NHS to wither because of the shameful politics of short-termist politicians. Talking of which, George Osborne. So this week, he will come forward with his budget. Now, we've already heard, more in the news today, that more cuts are coming our way. George Osborne's approach to the budget is political theatre. It's about politics, headlines and calculated positioning. Not a long-term economic plan, but a short-term political scam. Our focus is 100% on people. How will this budget affect the lives of those around us? Osborne asks, how will this play in the Daily Mail? We ask, how will this play in daily life? Thanks to tough choices that we took, the structural deficit will be abolished by next year. So, the UK now stands at a crossroads. Osborne is taking an unnecessary political choice, a road to cut further. If the Chancellor really wanted to help the economy, he should invest in and help our local communities, because it is time to give public sector workers the pay rise they deserve. It is time. It is time. It is time to be active and ambitious by investing in capital spending on housing, broadband and public transport. It is time to support the skills people want and need for the future. It is time to make the tax system work for small businesses. And communities thrive when enterprise and small business can thrive. But far too often, the cards are stacked against them. Google and Facebook can negotiate with the tax office for months, yet small businesses can't even get through on the telephone. As an aside, I don't know if anybody else noticed that Google recently made a breakthrough on artificial intelligence. One of their machines was able to beat a human in one of the most complex games around. Some people were impressed, not me. I get beaten by FIFA every night. So anyway, a niche joke, thank you. So we all know the system favours the big multinationals. Well, it's time we transform the way we treat small businesses in this country. Instead of government fawning over the multinationals, how about putting small business at the centre of our business economy? And we need to ensure our taxation system is fit for the future. It will be the new microbreweries, the community hubs, the app developers, the new firms in our communities who will make the difference. Some small businesses are small for good, the backbone of our economy. Some small businesses are small for now. If we back them, they will build our future. We need a system that works for all small businesses. The small for good, the small for now. Ensuring the tax system is a level playing field will take some work. And that is why I am delighted to announce that Vince Cable has agreed to chair an expert panel for me so we can look radically to reform the way we tax businesses. Over the next year, Vince's team will come forward with a new approach that is fit for the future, because when the system is broken, we Liberal Democrats will not defend it. We should fix it. And we are proud to be Britain's internationalist party. We believe that Britain should lead a response to the refugee crisis, not bury our heads in the sand. We believe Britain thrives when we lead amongst our neighbours in Europe, and we will be diminished when we walk away from the most important group of nations on the planet. And that is why it is deeply humiliating for Britain when Barack Obama criticised the Prime Minister for having a free ride on defence. Nowhere is it more plainly seen than in this government's dismal treatment of the Afghan interpreters. For 13 years, we relied on the skills of these brave and loyal individuals to keep our troops safe in a brutal and bloody conflict. Yet, our government is sending them back to Afghanistan to live at the mercy of the Taliban, or is leaving them to rot in refugee camps as they desperately try to reach the UK, the country they served. David Cameron, your treatment of the Afghan interpreters is a disgrace. Britain is better. Britain is better. than a free ride at the expense of those who laid their lives on the line for us. Show the world that we value those who show the ultimate loyalty to our country and bring them back to Britain without delay. You know, I guess it's hard to ignore and to miss the rise of inflammatory rhetoric in politics today. Rather than looking for solutions, people look for somebody to blame. And none of this is more apparent or scary than in the United States. Now, I confess that I'm slightly conflicted about Donald Trump. I mean, seriously, he can't be all bad. He had a cameo role in one of the greatest films of all time, Home Alone 2. Yeah, seriously, go with me. You know, and his one and only line is to give Macaulay Culkin's character directions to the hotel reception desk. And ladies and gentlemen, here's the rub. They were accurate directions. Yeah. Mind you, Macaulay Culkin's character then goes straight to the reception desk and commits credit card fraud to pay for ridiculous luxuries that he could not otherwise afford. This was a popular and influential film, guys, and frankly, it is a short hop from this kind of short-sighted consumer credit greed to the subprime market scandal, the fall of the banking system, and a worldwide recession, for which, on second thoughts, I now hold Trump personally responsible. So, here's the question. Is he a joke or is he terrifying? Well, a divergence of opinion. Here's what I think. we see the building of walls, the splitting of communities, the spouting of hatred and venom, and the attacking of the vulnerable and voiceless now constitute a political movement that is terrifying. But don't scoff at our cousins across the water thinking only in America, couldn't happen here, because across British politics there are the flag-waving nationalists, those who demonise the other. This party is the polar opposite of all of that. We will be the beacon of tolerance and acceptance, standing up for what unites us, not the differences that divide us. We see the tension at Trump rallies rise, and as we do so, I want to be absolutely clear. No matter where you're from, who you are, the colour of your skin, your faith, or who you love, we stand by your side. So, when you're a new leader, you fight to get attention, to make a mark. And a journalist said to me the other day, all I know about you is that you're that bloke who keeps banging on about refugees. And he meant it as a rebuke. I took it as a badge of honour. The biggest humanitarian crisis in Europe for 70 years, with no sign of this tragedy coming to an end. 190,000 refugees entered Europe in 2014, a post-war record. Last year, that number increased to 1 million this year. The UN thinks there could be 3 million, and most refugees aren't even coming to Europe. There's 1 million in Lebanon, 700,000 in Jordan, 2.7 million in Turkey. I could go on. So many facts, so many figures, such big numbers. Every one of them, an individual, a person. In Calais, Cologne, Lesbos, and in refugee centres here in the UK, I've only met 100 or so of them. But they are meetings I cannot forget, I will not forget, and I confess that I am personally affected by every single one of them. And so I feel personally ashamed by our government's response to this crisis. This is a crisis. This is a crisis right on our doorstep, yet our government chooses to look the other way. All those desperate people, and the Prime Minister will not take a single one of them. Not the orphaned 11-year-old in Calais, not the shivering 85-year-old woman I met in Lesbos, not the family sleeping rough in Macedonia. Now, I heard one Conservative columnist say this very week, look, the Prime Minister is bound by public opinion, and that will of course limit his room to act on the refugee crisis. Well, do you know what? Maybe it is time politicians stopped following and had the guts to lead. Now, Now is the time to say that when thousands of innocent kids are stranded, cold and alone in camps in Europe, we do not give a monkey's what the focus groups say. Now is the time to turn and face this crisis, to choose to play our part. Now is the time to take a stand, to lead, because this is not about statistics. This is about people just like you and me. This is about dignity and decency. Do to others as you would have them do to you. So on the morning of the 27th of October last year, I stood on the beach on the island of Lesbos and I met a couple in their 30s, a carpenter and a nursery teacher from the Daesh-occupied region of Iraq with them, still in their flimsy life jackets. They had their two little girls, aged 3 and 5. To distract them from the terror of the journey over the sea to Europe, they'd sung songs to the girls and told them stories for hours and hours. Why did they put them through this? They love their children as much as I love mine, yet they risked their daughters' lives. Why? Because the bigger threat, the bigger risk was to stay and not to flee. And the Britain I believe in offers that family sanctuary, hope and a future. David Cameron has gone through Calais plenty of times recently on his way to Brussels, but he's never got off the train there. He's never seen for himself the heartbreak of those who have had to leave everything to flee towards a country and a continent that you thought represented peace and security and got there only to be treated like dirt. He has refused to meet the proud people broken by the wickedness of those who sought to kill them at home and broken again by the callous indifference of those to whom they looked for sanctuary. Being 12 and alone in a camp thousands of miles from home, being in a boat tossed to and fro as you sought land in the darkness, hearing the screams of the people in the neighbouring vessel as it went down, having to leave your town at night, the town you grew up in, the only home you ever knew, seeing children as young as you slaughtered by Daesh. Their stories stay with me. They motivate me. No one should have to live as they have lived. We must act. But we don't have to allow these stories to end with desperation and tragedy. They can be about hope and opportunity. You see, 3 weeks ago, I went to Cologne. I met newly arrived refugees from Syria who were being integrated into German culture. I sat with a dozen young Syrian men who were being taught intensive German. They had vital skills and were on the path to a career, on the path to being a massive asset to a country that had given them a second chance. And then, a week ago, I met 6 young people from Eritrea and South Sudan, refugees from persecution. They, by hook and by crook, had got their way to England, to Gravesend. They spend their days sat in a hostel with little to do. The UK authorities would not even provide them with basic English language lessons. Now, one of these 6 had got herself onto a nursing course from this coming September, but the rest were being left to rot. Their clear cases for asylum were being kicked off into the long grass. Bored, scared, directionless, young people overflowing with talent and denied opportunity by a government that is deliberately blind to their potential. Refugees in Germany, welcomed, trained, empowered, transformed into enthusiastic tax-paying Germans. Refugees in Britain, held in contempt, trapped, their talents wasted and let down by people who act in our name. Britain is better than that. So I will continue to bang on about it, to speak for British values, for common sense, for action to help the desperate, for fear to give way to opportunity. But we can be absolutely certain that the United Kingdom has no chance of exercising any kind of leadership if it opts for isolation and irrelevance. And in just over 14 weeks, we will face a vote on Britain's future in Europe. By the way, when I came in this morning, and you might have noticed, the Leave stand was closed. They'd left. They clearly indeed felt that they were better off out. In a remarkable coincidence, it is exactly 25 years ago this weekend since my second favourite band, The Clash, had their one and only #1 hit. Should I stay or should I go? Seriously. Seriously. The lyrics are, if I stay there will be trouble, if I go it will be double. Project Fear there from Strummer and Jones. Taking the Theresa May approach to the referendum. Whatever works. Well, whether David Cameron's renegotiation impresses you or not, this is so much bigger than Cameron's deal. Here are the questions that we must all answer. We belong to the biggest, most successful market on the planet. Are we more prosperous staying in or getting out? We live in dangerous times. Are we safer alongside our friends and neighbours or isolated? We face vast international challenges, climate change, the refugee crisis, a global economy. Do we best tackle these together or on our own? These are the big questions, and the answers to me are crystal clear. We are stronger together. We are stronger in. For our prosperity, our security, our relevance, Britain must remain. But our national security is being challenged by more than just the referendum. Right now, the government are using it as an excuse to extend snooping and intrusion powers. Theresa May won't just have access to your Facebook messages, but to everything from your medical records to your child's baby monitor. And it's not just MI5 and MI6. Your local council will be able to know where you've been, who you've spoken to, as will the tax office. Not even the Home Office can pretend that this is purely about keeping people safe. Trying to fight terrorism by gathering more and more irrelevant information is illiberal and totally counterproductive. The haystacks of information will become so huge that finding the needle will become near impossible. No matter what the government calls it, don't make any mistake, this is the Snoopers' Charter back again, and we won't have it. But this is what we have come to expect from the Conservative government. Here's a party which took office backed by just 36% of British voters. They cling to a tiny majority of just 12, yet govern with a carefree arrogance, decimating social housing, demolishing green energy and demonising refugees. And they are taking their chance to change the rules in their favour, attacking public funding for the opposition to hold them to account, opposing Lords reform, gerrymandering boundaries and undermining the independence of the BBC. Even if you are a hardened Tory, you should be appalled by what this government is doing to our democracy. And you know what? It makes me unbelievably angry with Labour. Yeah, let me be clear about this. I'm not angry because Labour is now run by the kind of people who used to try and sell me tedious newspapers outside the Students' Union. That is... that is their funeral. I am angry with Labour because their internal chaos is letting this government off the hook. The Corbyn agenda is about taking over the Labour Party, not rescuing Britain from the Conservatives. I will not stand by while the Tories dig in for a generation. We can be, we must be what stands in their way. We have to build that force. Ward by ward, house by house, issue by issue, pick a ward and win it. This May, next May, all year round. We can win anywhere. You can win anywhere. Immerse yourself in your community. You keep in touch. You get things done. We know that no matter where you're from, your parents' wealth, the colour of your skin, your gender, your faith, or who you love, you must have every opportunity to succeed. And you have a home with us. Together, we can show a liberal vision for Britain that isn't obsessed with self-interest or the here and now, but with the long-term future of our country. With strategic capital investment, strong local public services, and a well-paid public sector, where enterprise is encouraged, where clean energy creates jobs, and where everyone has the right to a decent home, and where desperate people fleeing war and persecution are not demonised, they are welcomed. We are the opposition that will talk to our country, about our country. A champion for communities when they need it, the voice for junior doctors, standing by our teachers, backing innovation, a movement. We can be the voice that Britain needs and become the movement to make the difference. Find your community and make that difference. Liberal Democrats, this is our vision for Britain. Thank you.